As the night settles in, so can you. Let us know in the comments, where are you listening this and what is your current time. After that, close your eyes if you like. Nothing we're about to discuss is urgent or even particularly interesting. And let us begin. If you ever find yourself wondering how humans managed to stack over 2 million stone blocks into a perfect pyramid, you're not alone. The Great Pyramid of Giza, that ancient Egyptian skyscraper, stands as a testament to humanity's love for both monumental architecture and a good mystery. Spoiler alert, no secret alien technology involved. Just a lot of sweat, some clever geometry, and perhaps a bit of ancient Egyptian cursing when things didn't go as planned. Let's start with the numbers, because who doesn't love a good stat? The Great Pyramid was originally 146.6 meters tall, but it's shrunk a bit over the centuries. Now it's approximately 138.8 meters, thanks to erosion and maybe a few too many tourists leaning in for that perfect selfie. Built around 4,000 years ago during the reign of Pharaoh Khufu, this marvel of engineering consists of roughly 2.3 million blocks of limestone and granite, each weighing as much as an elephant, about 2.5 tons on average. Some of the larger stones even tip the scales at a casual 15 tons. That's enough rock to make your yoga instructor's patience seem feather-like by comparison. Now, let's tackle one of the juiciest myths head-on, the idea that the pyramids were built by slaves. It's an image straight out of a Cecil B. DeMille movie, complete with whips and chains, but reality is far more nuanced. Recent archaeological discoveries suggest that the workforce was composed of skilled labourers, who were well-fed and housed in nearby workers' villages. Think of them more as ancient contractors than oppressed slaves. Evidence shows they consumed a diet rich in meat, bread, and beer. Yes, beer, which sounds like a pretty decent gig, considering they were building one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The workers were organized into teams, and graffiti found in the pyramids even reveals some of their names, like the Friends of Khufu Gang. If you've ever been part of a group project, you know that naming your team is half the fun, even if it usually ends up with more internal bickering than actual camaraderie. These workers were likely seasonal labourers drafted during the inundation of the Nile when farming was on pause. So, no, they didn't spend their entire lives hauling stones under the Egyptian sun, but rather pitched in during their agricultural downtime. This also suggests a system more complex than mere slavery. It was a state-organized, social-economic mechanism that kept the wheels, or rather the sleds, turning. As for the purpose of this gigantic pile of rocks, it wasn't just about showing off Pharaoh Khufu's architectural prowess. The Great Pyramid was intended as a tomb, a grand resting place to ensure Khufu's smooth transition to the afterlife. The pyramid's alignment with the cardinal points is so precise that it would make any modern surveyor blush. This precision wasn't just for show, it had religious significance, tying the pharaoh's eternal soul to the cosmic order. The ancient Egyptians were nothing if not detail-oriented when it came to the afterlife. But what about those persistent alien theories? Well, they make for fun conspiracy theories, but fall apart faster than a sandcastle in a storm when faced with actual evidence. Ancient texts and archaeological findings show that the Egyptians had the know-how and manpower to pull off this colossal project. The idea of extraterrestrial involvement is more a testament to our modern fascination with the unknown than any reality. Plus, if aliens had helped, wouldn't they have left us a user manual or at least instructions on how to get the Wi-Fi working on a pyramid? In terms of construction techniques, it wasn't all brute force. Ingenious methods were employed, like using ramps to haul stones into place. Some suggest straight ramps, others argue for zigzagging ones, while a spiral ramp theory is also in the mix. The truth? We may never know exactly which method they used, but it's clear the Egyptians were engineering wizards long before the term was coined. In the end, the Great Pyramid of Giza is more than just an ancient curiosity. It's a symbol of human ambition, ingenuity, and the relentless pursuit of immortality. While we may never fully unravel all of its secrets, one thing is clear. It stands as a reminder of what humans can achieve when they set their minds to it, and maybe have a little help from a well-organized labor force with a penchant for beer. If the Great Pyramid of Giza stands as a testament to human ingenuity and ambition, then the tale of Atlantis serves as a monument to our collective imagination. Plato's accounts of this lost city have tantalized explorers, scholars, and conspiracy theorists alike for thousands of years. But let's face it, the story of Atlantis is like the ancient world's version of clickbait, irresistible yet perpetually out of reach. So, what's the real deal here? Plato first mentions Atlantis in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, written around 360 BC. According to him, Atlantis was a mighty and advanced civilization that existed roughly 9,000 years before his own time. It was a utopian society, rich in resources and military power, but eventually its hubris led to its downfall. The gods, apparently not fans of arrogance, decided they'd had enough and sent Atlantis crumbling into the sea in a single day and night of misfortune. Now, if that sounds like the ancient equivalent of a disaster movie, you're not wrong. So, was Atlantis a real place, or just an elaborate philosophical allegory? Plato wasn't exactly writing for the history books. He was a philosopher, using Atlantis as a cautionary tale about the perils of pride and power. He was essentially serving up a story with a moral wrapped in a veneer of historical narrative. It's like ancient storytelling with a side of ethical lesson, a sort of Aesop's Fables meets the History Channel. Now, let's dive into the nitty-gritty. The story of Atlantis has inspired countless theories, each more far-fetched than the last. One popular idea suggests that Atlantis was actually the Minoan civilization on the island of Crete. The Minoans were an advanced society, known for their sophisticated architecture and vibrant frescoes. Around 1600 BC, a catastrophic volcanic eruption on the nearby island of Thera, modern-day Santorini, devastated Crete, leading to the decline of Minoan civilization. This theory fits Plato's narrative of a powerful society meeting a watery end, but the timeline is way off. Plato's Atlantis was supposed to have existed 9,000 years before him, not a mere 1,000. Another theory suggests that Atlantis was located in the Mediterranean, near the Strait of Gibraltar, which Plato called the Pillars of Heracles. Advocates for this idea point to the submerged city of Tartessos in southern Spain, an ancient trading hub known for its wealth. Tartessos might have inspired the Atlantis myth, but again, the timeline and geographical details don't quite match Plato's description. Let's not forget the romantic appeal of placing Atlantis in the Atlantic Ocean. After all, it is named after the place. Some propose that the Azores, a group of Portuguese islands, are the remnants of Atlantis. While this theory captures the imagination, it requires a generous leap of faith and a willingness to ignore geological evidence. The Azores are the peaks of underwater volcanoes, not vestiges of a sunken continent. Economic and political context adds another layer to this enigma. Plato was writing during a time of political turmoil in Athens, not long after the Peloponnesian War had left the Greek city-states battered and bruised. The story of Atlantis can be seen as a critique of Athens's imperial ambitions and a warning against the overreach that led to their own near-collapse. In this light, Atlantis becomes less a mystery to solve and more a mirror reflecting the anxieties of Plato's world. But why does the legend persist? Part of its allure lies in our love for lost worlds and the hope of rediscovering them. Atlantis represents the ultimate treasure hunt, the civilization with advanced technology, untold riches, and, perhaps, the secrets to ancient wisdom. It's a story that appeals to our deepest desires for adventure and discovery, even if it means ignoring pesky details like evidence. In the end, the tale of Atlantis is a testament to human creativity and our relentless quest for meaning. It shows how stories can transcend their origins, inspiring generations to search for answers and dream of what might have been. Whether Atlantis existed or not is almost beside the point. The legend itself is a window into the hopes and fears of ancient Greece and a reminder of the power of myth to shape our understanding of the world. While we may never pinpoint Atlantis on a map, the search for it has led to real-world discoveries that enrich our understanding of ancient civilizations. Each theory and excavation adds a new layer to the tapestry of human history, reminding us that the journey is often just as important as the destination. As we wrap up our exploration of Atlantis, remember that the next time you hear of a new discovery, you're witnessing the enduring impact of a story told millennia ago, a story that continues to captivate and confound in equal measure. And from the depths of Atlantis, we now turn our gaze to another enigma, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, a wonder of the ancient world that might have been more mirage than reality. Cue the dramatic music. Are we dealing with lush terraces that kiss the sky, or just another ancient PR stunt worthy of a Babylonian Don Draper? Let's dig into the dirt, or lack thereof. First off, let's talk about the records, because, like an unreliable Wi-Fi connection, they're spotty at best. The Hanging Gardens are supposedly the brainchild of King Nebuchadnezzar II, who reigned from 605 to 562 BC. Legend has it he built these botanical marvels to please his homesick wife, Amytis of Media, who missed the greenery of her mountainous homeland. Sweet, but was Nebuchadnezzar really the original romantic or just a sucker for good press? According to ancient sources, these gardens soared 75 feet high, a verdant spectacle in the arid Babylonian landscape. Imagine tiered terraces brimming with exotic plants and vibrant flowers, all somehow flourishing in the middle of a desert. Sounds like a horticultural miracle, right? Or maybe a horticultural myth, considering there's more evidence for the existence of Bigfoot than these fabled gardens. Why the skepticism, you ask? Well, for starters, the timeline's as slippery as a politician's promise. The earliest detailed accounts, like those of Greek historians Strabo and Philo of Byzantium, came centuries after Nebuchadnezzar's reign. That's like writing a Yelp review for a restaurant that closed 100 years ago. Additionally, no Babylonian texts mention the gardens, which is suspicious given how much the Babylonians loved to boast about their architectural achievements. Inscriptions from Nebuchadnezzar's time celebrate his other constructions, like the mighty Ishtar Gate, but nary a peep about any sky-high shrubbery. And then there's the location, or lack thereof. Archaeologists have scoured Babylon, modern-day Iraq, with the fervour of a toddler searching for hidden Easter eggs, yet they've turned up zilch. No remnants of irrigation systems, no trace of the supposed terraces. Nada. It's like the gardens ghosted history. The only thing more elusive might be your car keys when you're already late, but let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, or in this case, the hypothetical hanging flora. Some scholars propose the gardens were actually located in Nineveh, the Assyrian capital, not Babylon. This theory sprouted from the work of British archaeologist Stephanie Daly, who suggests the confusion stems from ancient texts misattributing the gardens. She argues that Assyrian king Sennacherib, not Nebuchadnezzar, was the true horticultural hero. Sennacherib, known for his ambitious waterworks, could feasibly have constructed such gardens in Nineveh thanks to a well-documented network of aqueducts and canals. Economically, maintaining a garden in such a climate would have been a financial black hole. Consider the logistics. Water would need to be hauled from the Euphrates River, defying gravity via a complex system of pumps and pulleys. We're talking about a feat of engineering that would make even modern landscape architects break out in a cold sweat. Not to mention the cost of importing exotic plants and trees, an exercise in decadence that'd make an oil baron blush. So, if the gardens were indeed in Nineveh, they could have been more plausible, given the infrastructure. But this theory doesn't quite erase the allure of the Babylonian version, the one that graces every list of the Seven Wonders. The image of terraces teeming with life amidst the sands has a romantic pull that's hard to resist, much like the siren song of a midnight snack. Whether in Babylon or Nineveh, the gardens' legendary status owes much to their symbolic power. They represented a triumph over nature, a testament to human ingenuity and ambition, assuming they existed at all. It's this blend of beauty and skepticism that keeps us captivated, much like the elusive concept of free will or why socks always disappear in the wash. Ultimately, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, or Nineveh, are emblematic of our eternal quest to shape our environment, to create beauty where none existed before. They remind us of the lengths humans will go to impress, to innovate, and, sometimes, to fabricate. As we speculate over soil and stone, it's clear that the gardens, real or imagined, continue to flower in the fertile ground of our imagination. As we pause here, with the sun setting on our Babylonian or Assyrian musings, remember, the mystery isn't just about whether the gardens existed, it's about why we're so fascinated by them in the first place. Stay tuned as we prepare to delve into more ancient wonders, because history never stops being surprising. And speaking of ancient wonders that keep our imagination spinning like a pharaoh's top, let's pivot south to the sun-baked deserts of Peru. Here, the Nazca lines stretch across the earth like a giant's cryptic doodle pad, leaving us to wonder if the ancients were merely bored, or if there's more scribbled beneath the surface. First, let's talk scale, because these aren't your average backyard sand drawings. The Nazca lines cover a jaw-dropping 450 square kilometres, featuring over 800 straight lines, 300 geometric figures, and 70 zoomorphic designs. These lines range from simple shapes to complex figures, like a 93-metre-long monkey, a 110-metre-long hummingbird, and even what looks like a giant astronaut, a detail that conspiracy theorists eat for breakfast with their alien cereal. Carved between 500 BCE and 500 CE, these geoglyphs are a testament to the Nazca culture's knack for art that's not so much in your face as it is under your feet. But let's be clear. These weren't just big doodles meant to entertain extraterrestrial visitors or serve as the world's largest game of Connect. The dots. Theories about their purpose are as varied and winding as the lines themselves. One popular hypothesis is that these figures were part of astronomical calendars. Some scholars suggest they aligned with celestial events because apparently the Nazca had a penchant for sky watching that rivaled any modern stargazer. The idea is alluring. Imagine a society so advanced that they mapped the stars with desert dirt. Yet, while some alignments do exist, they don't harmonize neatly with this theory. It's like trying to fit a square peg into a round, starry night sky. Another theory, equally compelling and just as contested, proposes the lines served as sacred pathways used in religious ceremonies. The Nazca were known for their complex belief systems and rituals, and it's plausible that these lines were part of a larger spiritual landscape. Pilgrimages or processions might have wound along these paths, with the desert serving as a vast, open-air temple. It's a theory that adds a poetic layer to the lines, transforming them from mere designs into the beating heart of Nazca spirituality. But hold your llamas, because modern intrigue insists on adding a splash of sci-fi. Enter the alien runway theory, where some suggest the lines were intended as landing strips for extraterrestrial visitors. Thanks, Eric von Däniken, for turning the Nazca Desert into a cosmic airport. This theory, while delightful in a what-if kind of way, lacks any actual, evidence. No alien graffiti saying, "E.T. was here," has been found. The Nazca people had the skills and reasons to create these lines without needing a UFO to drop by with blueprints. Economics also played a role in the creation of the Nazca lines. The Nazca civilization thrived in a region where water was scarce and survival required innovation. The lines might have been part of a ritual to invoke divine favor for rain, making them not just spiritual symbols but practical ones too. Imagine praying for rain by crafting art that could only be seen by the gods themselves. Talk about aiming high. Now, let's bust some myths about how these lines were made. The common assumption is that their creation required advanced technology or a bird's-eye view. In reality, the Nazca achieved these colossal figures with simple tools and a keen understanding of their environment. By removing the reddish-brown iron oxide-coated pebbles that covered the desert surface, they exposed the light-coloured earth beneath, creating stunning contrasts. They used wooden stakes to map out their designs with remarkable accuracy. No drones, no satellites, just plain old human ingenuity and a lot of desert elbow grease. What's truly mind-boggling is the line's durability. The natural conditions of the Nazca Desert, a mix of minimal wind, stable climate, and arid ground, have kept these artworks intact for centuries. It's a collaboration between human effort and Mother Nature that any modern artist would envy. In terms of cultural significance, these lines offer a window into a society that, while geographically isolated, was rich in creativity and complexity. They demonstrate a unique interplay between the Nazca people and their environment, showing us that even in harsh conditions, humanity finds a way to leave its mark, literally. Understanding these lines helps us appreciate the Nazca, not as mysterious architects of the unknown, but as real people with real challenges and aspirations. As we peel back the layers of the Nazca lines, the true enigma isn't just the lines themselves, but the people who crafted them. Why did they invest so much effort into something only visible from the sky, or perhaps from the realm of the gods? It's a mystery that reminds us of the lengths to which humans will go to express belief, hope, and identity, no matter how desolate the surroundings. So, as we pause on this dusty path, keep your eyes on the horizon. The Nazca lines may remain one of history's great puzzles, but they also stand as a testament to humanity's eternal quest to connect, whether it's with the stars above, the gods beyond, or the people yet to come. Stay tuned, because our exploration of ancient mysteries isn't over yet. And from lines etched into the earth, let's flip the page to a mystery wrapped in parchment. The Voynich manuscript. This is the literary equivalent of a Rubik's Cube that laughs in your face as you try to solve it. If the Nazca lines leave you looking to the sky for answers, the Voynich manuscript invites you to squint at its pages until your eyes cross. It's a book that's less about reading and more about endless guessing. So, what's the deal with this cryptic codex? Picture a manuscript about the size of a modern-day paperback, but stuffed with 240 pages of indecipherable script and illustrations that look like a botanist's fever dream. Discovered in 1912 by a Polish book dealer named Wilfred Voynich, hence the name, the manuscript is believed to date back to the early 15th century. However, if you're hoping to use it as a guide to medieval gardening, think again. Its text is written in an unknown language or code, and its pages are filled with drawings of plants that don't seem to exist in any botanical record. Talk about a green thumb from another dimension. Let's talk numbers, because they're the only thing about this manuscript that's remotely concrete. Radiocarbon dating of the vellum pages places the book's creation between 1404 and 1438. That's right, it's older than the printing press, which means someone went through a lot of trouble to handwrite what might be history's most elaborate prank. And speaking of elaborate, the manuscript contains over 170,000 characters, written in a script that defies all known alphabets. It's like it was penned by a medieval hacker with a penchant for gibberish. Numerous cryptologists, linguists, and even code breakers from World War II have attempted to crack the code, yet none have succeeded. It's the linguistic equivalent of a locked door with no key in sight. Some even suggest the manuscript could be an elaborate hoax, a medieval con job designed to fleece a wealthy buyer. After all, if you can't understand it, you can't exactly verify its contents, can you? But that theory assumes a level of cynicism that feels almost too modern for the Middle Ages. Let's not forget the economic context. Creating a manuscript in the 15th century was no small task. Vellum, made from animal skin, was expensive, and the meticulous artwork suggests someone with both time and resources to burn. It's hard to imagine someone investing so much into a hoax without expecting some serious return on investment. Unless, of course, the creator was the medieval equivalent of a performance artist, in which case, job well done. But what about those bizarre illustrations? The manuscript is divided into sections that appear to cover topics like botany, astronomy, biology, and even cosmology. Yet the plants are unrecognizable. The astronomical charts feature non-existent constellations, and the biological diagrams look like something Salvador Dalí might sketch after a long night out. It's as if the Voynich manuscript is a window into an alternate universe where logic took a vacation. One theory suggests it was a pharmacopoeia, a guide to medicinal plants and their uses. A sort of medieval WebMD, if you will. Another posits it's a coded alchemical text, preserving secret knowledge for the initiated. Yet, without a Rosetta Stone to decode it, these theories remain as speculative as the manuscript's contents. The political backdrop of its time offers another layer to the enigma. The early 15th century was a period of upheaval, with Europe recovering from the Black Death and embroiled in the 100 Years' War. In such turbulent times, a book filled with secrets, real or imagined, could have been as valuable as gold to those seeking an edge in the uncertain world of medieval power dynamics. And then there's the human nature angle. Why are we so obsessed with solving the Voynich manuscript? Perhaps it's the allure of the unsolved, the challenge of a puzzle that has stumped the best and brightest for over 600 years. It's a reminder of the limits of our understanding, a humbling testament to the fact that for all our technological advancements, some mysteries remain tantalizingly out of reach. Yet the manuscript's existence also speaks to the timeless human drive to create, to communicate, and perhaps to conceal. Whether an earnest attempt at recording lost knowledge or an elaborate ruse, the Voynich manuscript embodies the complexity of human intent. It's a legacy that challenges our assumptions and invites us to question what we know or think we know about the past. In the end, the Voynich manuscript is more than a mystery to be solved. It's a mirror reflecting our fascination with the unknown, a testament to our relentless curiosity. As we wrap up this exploration of ancient enigmas, remember that history isn't just about uncovering facts, it's about understanding the stories we tell ourselves and the truths we seek. So, as you close the book on this journey through the mysteries of the ancient world, keep your mind open and your questions alive. Because whether it's a pyramid in the desert, a lost city beneath the waves, or an indecipherable manuscript, the past is never just history. It's a conversation waiting to happen. If you're looking for a story with more twists and turns than a Bollywood soap opera, Mohandas Gandhi's early life has you covered. Our tale begins not in India, the land of curry and cricket, but in the damp, fog-laden streets of London. That's right. Our future Mahatma kicked off his transformative journey amidst the relentless drizzle of the UK. In 1888, a 19-year-old Gandhi set sail for Britain, armed with little more than dreams, a few English phrases, and a promise to his mother to steer clear of meat and alcohol. Spoiler alert, London wasn't exactly known for its vegetarian delicacies back then. Gandhi found himself in a land where a meal without beef was as rare as a sunny British summer day. Determined to keep his promise, he scoured the city for vegetarian fare, eventually stumbling upon the Vegetarian Society. Here, he wasn't just a member, but became an editor for their magazine. Some might call this commitment to veggies a bit over the top, but hey, it set the stage for his lifelong dedication to principles. And who knew? This quirky little dietary quirk would lead him to meet some of the era's most influential thinkers. Now, let's talk about Gandhi's academic prowess, or the lack thereof. Despite his later reputation for wisdom, his student days were anything but illustrious. As a law student at University College London, Gandhi had all the swagger of a library mouse. He spent more time reading about philosophy and ethics than cramming legal textbooks, not exactly the makings of a courtroom legend. Gandhi's stay in London was a crash course in cultural shock. If the British weather didn't dampen his spirits, the endless etiquette rules did. Imagine a young Indian in a city where everyone wears stovepipe hats and monocles trying to fit in. He even took lessons in ballroom dancing, French, and elocution. The effort was commendable, but let's just say Gandhi was never going to be the next Fred Astaire. Fast forward to 1893, and Gandhi found himself on a train in Pietermaritzburg, South Africa. Here's the kicker. This wasn't just any train ride. It was the pivotal moment that would turn a timid lawyer into a fearless freedom fighter. Gandhi had bought a first-class ticket, as one does when you're a lawyer with a penchant for creature comforts. But the racial segregation laws of South Africa didn't care much for his ticket. Gandhi was unceremoniously booted from the carriage because of his skin colour, left shivering on the station platform overnight, a humiliating experience that would have made anyone else want to hightail it back to London. But not Gandhi. Instead of retreating, he dug in his heels, spending the next 21 years in South Africa fighting for civil rights. Talk about a plot twist. His legal career in the region was a mixed bag, though, riddled with setbacks and small victories. He established the Natal Indian Congress in 1894, a move that would be the equivalent of a modern-day viral tweet, rallying the local Indian community against discriminatory laws. Yet, Gandhi's legal journey was anything but smooth sailing. Picture him, a young lawyer in an ill-fitting suit, often outmanoeuvred by the more experienced British attorneys. His courtroom battles were about as successful as a cat-herding contest. Still, every defeat taught him something new, shaping the strategies he'd later use in India. Let's not forget the Gandhi who was a family man, albeit one who was more absent than present. He married Kasturba at the tender age of 13, a common practice of the time. The marriage was arranged, of course, because nothing says romantic like having your life partner chosen by your parents. Yet Kasturba was a formidable presence herself, often standing by Gandhi's side through thick and thin. Gandhi's early life was a series of experiments, some in truth, others in sheer persistence. London taught him resilience, and South Africa honed his resolve. The myth of the infallible Mahatma often overshadows the reality of a man who was as human as the rest of us, with insecurities, failures, and an insatiable curiosity for life. So there you have it, a young Gandhi, tossed from a train, yet sowing the seeds of defiance that would eventually topple an empire. His story is one of transformation, not just of himself, but of entire nations. And it all started with a young man in a foreign land, trying to navigate the choppy waters of colonial prejudice and cultural dislocation. From the chilly platforms of South Africa, Gandhi finally found himself back on Indian soil in 1915, with little more than a pair of round spectacles and a head full of revolutionary ideas. India was a land of contrasts. Think Bollywood extravagance meets British bureaucracy with a heavy dose of agrarian misery. Gandhi returned to a nation simmering with discontent, primed for a leader to ignite the flames of change. Now let's get one thing straight. Gandhi didn't just stroll in, wave his hand, and poof, independence movement. No, the man was calculated, methodical, and dare I say, a bit of a perfectionist. He spent his first year back almost like a detective, travelling over 8,000 kilometres across India, a journey that would put any travel blogger to shame. He aimed to understand the pulse of the nation, the kind of grassroots research that would make modern-day politicians green with envy. Enter 1917, the Champaran district of Bihar. A place that was less about Bollywood glamour and more about grinding poverty. Picture this, a land where indigo farmers were squeezed like lemons by British planters, forced to cultivate crops that bled them dry financially. The exploitative Tinkathia system was like a legal noose around the farmers' necks, leaving them with barely enough to survive. Gandhi, with his knack for spotlighting injustice, saw this as a perfect stage for his first act of civil disobedience. With the charm of a seasoned diplomat and the tenacity of a bulldog, Gandhi threw himself into the Champaran Satyagraha. It was a genius move. He didn't just show up and start shouting slogans. He listened, documented grievances, and cleverly played the public sentiment like a maestro. The British, caught off guard by this lawyer-turned-activist's sudden spotlight on their dirty laundry, were forced into a corner. Gandhi's efforts led to the abolition of the oppressive system, and the farmers got some much-needed relief. It was a victory not just in terms of policy, but in showing the power of non-violent resistance. But just when you thought Gandhi would rest on his laurels, he switched scenes faster than a Netflix binge-watcher. Next stop, Kedah, Gujarat, where farmers were grappling with failed crops and an unsympathetic British tax policy. The colonial government, known for its iron fist approach, decided that empathy was for the weak and demanded taxes anyway. Gandhi, never one to back down from a fight, initiated the Kedah Satyagraha in 1918, urging farmers to stand firm and refuse payment. This wasn't just about taxes, it was a masterclass in rallying collective action. Gandhi's philosophy was simple. Unity is strength. And the farmers, inspired by his resolve, stood their ground. The British, eventually realizing that squeezing blood from a stone wasn't a sustainable strategy, conceded, suspending the tax. Gandhi had struck another blow, demonstrating that an empire could be challenged with nothing more than unity and relentless determination. Now, let's talk about Gandhi's flair for fashion, or lack thereof. You see, he wasn't just about toppling colonial policies, he was also a master of symbolism. Enter the charkha, or spinning wheel. To the untrained eye, it was just a tool for making thread. But Gandhi played it like a PR expert, transforming it into a symbol of self-reliance and resistance. By encouraging Indians to spin their own cloth, he was saying, "Stick it to the man. We don't need your fancy British textiles." The economic implications were profound. By 1921, imports of British cloth had plummeted from 102 million rupees to 57 million, a drop so significant it could have given the British textile industry a collective heart attack. The humble spinning wheel became a revolutionary act, a simple yet effective way of hitting the British where it hurt, right in the pocketbook. But hold on a second. Before we paint Gandhi as an untouchable saint draped in homespun fabric, let's pull back the curtain on some of his more controversial moves. Gandhi was a leader, yes, but also a man of contradictions. His relationships, particularly those with his closest allies, sometimes resembled a game of political chess. Take his interactions with the likes of Subhash Chandra Bose or B.R. Ambedkar. These weren't just friendly tea parties, they were clashes of ideology, strategy, and vision for India's future. And then there were his personal experiments, often as perplexing as a plot twist in a thriller. His vow of celibacy, for instance, was as much about self-discipline as it was about control over himself and those around him. His ashram life, while romanticized as idyllic simplicity, also harbored its share of strict rules and expectations. The man was complex, a web of ideals and idiosyncrasies that sometimes left even his ardent followers scratching their heads. So, there you have it, Gandhi's return to India was not just a homecoming, it was the dawn of a movement. His early campaigns, Champaran and Kedah, were not just battles against colonial exploitation, but lessons in the power of peaceful resistance. The spinning wheel was not merely a tool, but a symbol that spun a nation towards self-reliance. Yet, behind the serene smile and round glasses was a leader as human as any, navigating the turbulent waters of liberation with both brilliance and flaws. And as the story of India's independence movement unfolds, Gandhi's role in it would continue to evolve, both as a beacon of hope and a figure of contention. But that's a tale for another time, one where the stakes would rise, the battles would intensify, and the legacy of the Mahatma would be both revered and questioned. Stay tuned. With Gandhi's return to India setting the stage for revolutionary change, let's fast forward to one of the most iconic acts of defiance in history, the Salt March of 1930. Now, if you're thinking, salt? Really? That's the hill Gandhi chose to die on? You're not alone. At first glance, the idea of rebelling over something that sits next to the pepper shaker seems absurd. But here's the kicker. The British salt tax was more than just a pinch of inconvenience. It was an economic stranglehold on the Indian populace. Imagine being taxed on a basic necessity. That's like the government slapping a fee every time you breathe. Salt was a staple in every household, essential for survival in India's scorching climate. Yet, the British, in their infinite wisdom, decided to monopolize its production and sale. The salt tax was a financial burden on the poorest of the poor, making it the perfect symbol of colonial oppression. Enter Gandhi, ever the strategist, who saw the salt tax as the Achilles heel of British rule. On March 12, 1930, he embarked on a 240-mile march from Sabarmati Ashram to the coastal village of Dundee. Picture this, a 61-year-old man, as wiry as a strand of his own homespun cloth, leading a procession like the Pied Piper of passive resistance. It was the ultimate road trip of rebellion, a journey that would take 24 days and capture the world's attention. Gandhi and his followers walked an average of 10 miles a day, a feat that would put even the most dedicated Fitbit user to shame. Along the way, villages transformed into rally points, with crowds swelling like a crescendo of discontent. By the time they reached Dundee on April 5, 1930, Gandhi's entourage had ballooned into the thousands. On the following day he bent down, scooped up a handful of salty earth, and declared, "War not with weapons, but with symbolism." The Salt March wasn't just a protest, it was a masterclass in public relations. Gandhi knew how to play the media like a fiddle, ensuring that the march was covered by newspapers worldwide. The international press, always hungry for a compelling narrative, lapped up the spectacle of an unarmed man challenging an empire. Even Hollywood celebrities took note. Enter Charlie Chaplin, the silent film star whose comedic antics had made him a household name. Chaplin, intrigued by Gandhi's philosophy and charisma, met the Mahatma in London later that year. It was a meeting of two icons, one wielding a cane in slapstick, the other using it to spearhead a revolution. The Salt March was a headline grabber, but it was also a shrewd maneuver in the chess game of colonial politics. It wasn't just about salt, it was about highlighting the absurdity of British rule. The imagery of Gandhi walking barefoot against the might of an empire was potent, pushing the British into a PR nightmare. Here was a frail old man, not storming fortresses or inciting violence, but simply making salt. It was a move so disarming that it left the British flummoxed, unsure how to respond without looking like bullies. But let's not get too swept away by the romance of it all. The march was not without its critics. Some dismissed it as a futile gesture, questioning whether picking up a pinch of salt could really shake the foundations of British imperialism. Others within India's own burgeoning independence movement felt that Gandhi's tactics were too passive, too slow. Yet, it was precisely this non-violent approach that garnered global sympathy and brought international pressure to bear on the British. The economic context of the Salt March is critical to understanding its impact. British authorities collected about 25 million rupees annually from the salt tax, a tidy sum that financed their administration in India. By encouraging Indians to make their own salt, Gandhi struck at the fiscal heart of British control. The movement sparked a wave of civil disobedience across the country, with people deliberately breaking the salt laws, boycotting British goods, and refusing to pay taxes. It was as if a wave of rebellion was crashing over the subcontinent, eroding the edifice of colonial power grain by grain. Internationally, Gandhi's image was crafted with the precision of a Hollywood star's brand. The bespectacled, dhoti-clad figure exuded simplicity and sincerity, qualities that resonated with audiences worldwide. The Western press, often enamored with narratives of the underdog, portrayed Gandhi as a saintly figure battling injustice with nothing more than his moral compass. It was a portrait as appealing as it was oversimplified, sometimes glossing over the complexities and contradictions that defined Gandhi's life and leadership. As the global spotlight shone on India, the British found themselves in a quandary. Could they crush the salt protest without drawing international condemnation? The answer, as it turned out, was a resounding no. The Salt March was a pivotal turning point, not because it immediately ended British rule, but because it demonstrated the power of mass mobilization and non-violent resistance. It was a reminder that sometimes the mightiest blows come not from the barrel of a gun, but from the quiet determination of a barefoot pilgrim. Yet, even as Gandhi's star rose, the challenges facing India were far from resolved. The Salt March was one chapter in a much larger saga, a prelude to further struggles and negotiations. The road to independence would be long and fraught, with Gandhi continuing to walk its twists and turns, his legacy both celebrated and scrutinized in equal measure. And so, the tale of the Salt March ends not with a triumphant crescendo, but with the opening notes of an ongoing symphony of resistance. The salt that once symbolized subjugation became a testament to the indomitable spirit of a nation yearning for freedom. But as history would soon reveal, this was only the beginning of a journey that would test the limits of patience, perseverance, and the power of peaceful protest. Stay tuned, because the story of India's fight for independence is far from over, and Gandhi's role in it is about to take even more dramatic turns. As the echoes of the Salt March settled into the annals of history, India's struggle for independence was far from reaching its crescendo. Fast forward a decade, and the world found itself entangled in the throes of World War II, a global conflict that, ironically, set the stage for Gandhi's next act of defiance. Yep, while the world was busy dropping bombs and drawing battle lines, Gandhi was sharpening his most potent weapon, the power of non-cooperation. The year was 1942, and the British, neck-deep in wartime chaos, needed India's support like a caffeine addict needs a morning cup of joe. Enter the Cripps mission, a diplomatic endeavour as doomed as a paper umbrella in a monsoon. Sir Stafford Cripps, the British envoy with a name that screams Victorian-era aristocrat, landed in India with a suitcase full of promises that were as appealing as a lukewarm cup of tea. The British dangled the carrot of post-war independence, but with strings attached that were as tangled as a ball of yarn in a kitten's paws. Gandhi, never one to mince words, likened the offer to a post-dated cheque on a crashing bank. And let's be real, who wants to cash a cheque that might bounce higher than a kangaroo on a trampoline? The illusion of autonomy was lost on Gandhi, who saw through the charade and demanded immediate, unqualified independence. Enter the Quit India movement, Gandhi's magnum opus in the symphony of resistance. On August 8, 1942, at the All India Congress Committee session in Bombay, now Mumbai, Gandhi issued a clarion call with the simplicity of a Zen koan, do or die. The message was clear as a bell. India would settle for nothing less than complete freedom. It was a rallying cry that resonated across the subcontinent, igniting a fervour that was, quite literally, incendiary. The British response was as predictable as a villain's monologue in a Bond film. Within hours of the resolution, Gandhi and the entire Congress leadership were rounded up faster than you can say draconian crackdown. Gandhi found himself once again behind bars, proving that the British loved imprisoning him almost as much as they loved their afternoon tea. This time, however, the stakes were different. India was not just a colony seeking liberation, it was a nation at the heart of a global conflict. The irony was palpable, a pacifist icon locked up while the world waged war. Gandhi's imprisonment at the Aga Khan Palace in Pune wasn't just a matter of confinement, it was a calculated move to suffocate the movement. But if history has taught us anything, it's that imprisoning Gandhi only served to amplify his influence. While Gandhi was confined, The Quit India movement took on a life of its own, spiraling into widespread civil disobedience. Protests erupted like fireworks on Diwali, with strikes, demonstrations, and acts of sabotage becoming the order of the day. The British, struggling to maintain control, responded with the subtlety of a sledgehammer deploying troops, imposing martial law and arresting thousands. Economically, the movement was a thorn in the side of the British war effort. With the Indian National Congress declaring non-cooperation, the administrative machinery ground to a halt. The ripple effect was felt in the war economy, where the British reliance on Indian resources was as crucial as oxygen. The disruption was akin to pulling the rug out from under a tightrope walker. Yet, for all its fervour, the Quit India movement was not a unified front. The cracks in its facade were as visible as the lines on an old map. Not everyone was on board with Gandhi's strategy. The Muslim League, under Muhammad Ali Jinnah, saw it as an opportunity to further its demand for a separate state, an idea that would eventually carve Pakistan out of the Indian subcontinent. The political chessboard was as convoluted as a soap opera plot, with alliances and betrayals playing out in real time. Inside the prison walls, Gandhi's health deteriorated, a poignant reminder that even the indomitable spirit can be worn down by time and circumstance. The death of his wife, Kasturba, in 1944 was a personal tragedy that cut deeper than any political setback. Gandhi, the man who had become a symbol of resilience, was now grappling with a loss that stripped away the veneer of invincibility. Despite the setbacks, Gandhi's philosophy of non-violence continued to resonate worldwide. His influence stretched beyond India's shores, inspiring movements for civil rights and freedom across the globe. Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela. These were figures who looked to Gandhi's teachings as a blueprint for their own struggles against oppression. But let's not sugarcoat the contradictions that defined Gandhi's legacy. His commitment to peace was unwavering, yet he operated in a world where conflict was the lingua franca. Critics argued that his methods, while noble, were ineffectual against the cold, hard realities of geopolitics. The British Empire was a juggernaut, and Gandhi's insistence on non-violence seemed, at times, like bringing a quill to a sword fight. Yet, therein lay the brilliance of Gandhi's approach. He wasn't just challenging British rule, he was challenging the very notion of power itself. In a world obsessed with might, Gandhi's strength lay in his refusal to play by the rules. He flipped the script, making the British appear as oppressors in the eyes of a global audience that was increasingly sympathetic to the cause of Indian independence. As World War II drew to a close, the geopolitical landscape shifted like tectonic plates. The British, battered and broke, faced mounting pressure to decolonize. India, with its growing clamour for freedom, was an empire's headache that could no longer be ignored. The Quit India movement, despite its initial setbacks, had set the wheels of change in motion. And so, as Gandhi emerged from prison in 1944, the stage was set for the final act in India's struggle for independence. The man who had once been derided as a half-naked fakir by Winston Churchill was now a formidable force in the twilight of the Raj. The road ahead was fraught with challenges, but Gandhi's vision of an independent India remained as steadfast as ever. Yet the journey was far from over. The push for independence would reach its climax in the years to come, and Gandhi's role, both revered and contested, would be crucial in shaping the destiny of a nation. The story of India's liberation was an epic saga, and as the final chapter approached, the world watched with bated breath, eager to see how the tale of the Mahatma would unfold. Stay tuned, because the climax is just around the corner, and it's bound to be a historical roller coaster with twists you won't see coming. As the sun began to set on British colonial rule in India, the country's destiny teetered on the edge of a seismic shift. Gandhi, emerging from imprisonment, was thrust into a landscape as politically jagged as the Himalayas. The Quit India movement had left an indelible mark, but the path to freedom was littered with thorns, not least the thorny issue of partition. A blueprint that would divide British India into two nations, India and Pakistan. Let's unravel this knotty problem. By 1945, the British were as worn out as a pair of old boots after World War II. The war had cost them a staggering $3 billion, that's right, billion with a B, and maintaining control over India was akin to trying to hold sand with a sieve. The political climate in India was a cauldron bubbling over with demand for independence. But there was a catch, and a big one at that. The Muslim League, led by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, was adamant about carving out a separate state for Muslims. The Congress Party, with Gandhi as its spiritual leader, envisioned a united India, a vision that was increasingly looking like a pipe dream. Amid these clashing ideologies, the British, ever the cunning chess players, saw partition as the least messy way to exit. The decision was made, rather hastily, in February 1947, when the last Viceroy, Lord Louis Mountbatten, was given a deadline tighter than a drum: pull out of India by June 1948. But in a move that would make even the most impulsive decision-maker blush, he advanced the timeline to August 1947, a mere 6 months after taking office. Imagine planning a wedding in 2 weeks. Now multiply that chaos by a few million lives. The partition plan was announced on June 3, 1947, creating Pakistan on August 14 and an independent India on August 15. The partition line, drawn by Sir Cyril Radcliffe, was as arbitrary as a game of pin the tail on the donkey, slicing through provinces, villages, and families without regard for the human cost. Radcliffe, who had never set foot in India before, was given just 5 weeks to draw the boundaries. The result? An estimated 10 to 20 million people displaced, triggering one of the largest and bloodiest migrations in human history. For Gandhi, the partition was a bitter pill to swallow. He had envisioned an India where Hindus and Muslims coexisted like masala in a curry, distinct yet harmonious. But the reality was a stew of communal violence, with riots erupting like fireworks across the subcontinent. Gandhi, the apostle of non-violence, found himself in the midst of chaos, trying to douse flames with a bucket of hope. He moved to Calcutta, now Kolkata, then a simmering cauldron of communal unrest, and fasted in protest, a human buffer in a sea of hatred. Gandhi's health, like the political situation, was precarious. The fast took its toll, but it worked temporarily. Peace was restored in Calcutta, but the larger issue of partition remained a wound that wouldn't heal. The human cost was staggering. An estimated 1 to 2 million people lost their lives in the violence, and countless women were abducted and assaulted. The partition was not just a line on a map, it was a deep scar etched into the collective memory of 2 nations. As the dust settled on the newly independent nations, Gandhi found himself increasingly sidelined in the political arena. The Indian National Congress, now led by Jawaharlal Nehru, was steering the ship of state, and Gandhi's vision of a simple agrarian society was at odds with Nehru's modernist agenda. The Mahatma, ever the outsider, retreated from the political limelight, focusing instead on communal harmony and the upliftment of the downtrodden. But Gandhi's peace was short-lived. On January 30, 1948, while attending a prayer meeting in New Delhi, he was assassinated by Nathuram Godse, a Hindu nationalist who saw Gandhi's conciliatory approach to Muslims as betrayal. The bullet that struck Gandhi was not just a personal tragedy, it was a shot heard around the world, silencing a voice that had become synonymous with non-violence and resistance. In the aftermath of Gandhi's assassination, the nation plunged into grief. An estimated 2 million people attended his funeral procession, a testament to his profound impact. Yet, the irony was stark. The man who preached peace was felled by violence. Gandhi's death was a grim reminder of the deep divisions that still festered beneath the surface of a newly independent nation. Gandhi's legacy, like his life, is a tapestry of contradictions. He is celebrated as the father of the nation, yet his ideals often clashed with the pragmatic demands of politics. His commitment to non-violence inspired global movements, yet his personal life and some of his philosophies were subjects of scrutiny and debate. Critics point to his views on race during his early years in South Africa and his controversial experiments with celibacy as blemishes on an otherwise saintly image. But perhaps Gandhi's greatest legacy lies in the power of his ideas. He demonstrated that change could be wrought not with might, but with moral courage. His philosophy of satyagraha, or truth force, became a lodestar for activists worldwide, from Martin Luther King Jr. in the civil rights movement to Nelson Mandela in the anti-apartheid struggle. Gandhi's spirit of peaceful resistance continues to echo across the corridors of history, a reminder that the pen can indeed be mightier than the sword. In the end, Gandhi was a man who defied the easy categorization of hero or saint. He was a flawed human, driven by an unwavering belief in the potential for good in humanity. His life was a testament to the idea that one person, armed with conviction and courage, can indeed change the world. As the nation he helped free continues to grapple with its complex identity, Gandhi's legacy endures, a beacon of hope and a mirror reflecting both the aspirations and imperfections of the human spirit. And so, the tale of Gandhi concludes, not with a definitive ending, but with an open invitation. A challenge to each of us to carry forward his vision of a world where peace and justice prevail. As history continues to unfold, the question remains, how will we, in our own time, choose to walk the path that Gandhi illuminated? The answer, much like Gandhi's journey, is a story still being written. In the mists of ancient history, where the lines between fact and legend blur like a watercolor painting left out in the rain, the Celtic Druids emerge as enigmatic figures wielding both mystique and power. About 2,500 years ago, when your ancestors were likely inventing the wheel or figuring out the joys of fermented grape juice, the Druids were already carving out their niche in the regions we now call Ireland, Britain and Gaul. Imagine them as the original multitaskers, priests, judges, teachers, and sometimes political advisors. If LinkedIn had existed back then, these guys would have had profiles that would make you question your life choices. The term Druid itself is rooted in the Proto-Celtic word Druid, ak, which means oak knower. This isn't surprising, given their penchant for hanging out in oak groves. Think of it as their version of a hip coffee shop, a place to contemplate the universe and maybe draft a few mystical texts. But here's where things get tricky. The Druids didn't leave behind any written records of their own. Nope, not a single Celtic post-it note survives to tell us what they were really up to. So, we're left piecing together their story from the writings of others, like Julius Caesar, who wasn't exactly an unbiased Yelp reviewer. Caesar's accounts are among the most detailed sources we have, but remember, he was a guy with a vested interest. His descriptions of the Druids come wrapped up in his grand narrative of conquering Gaul, which is modern-day France and parts of Belgium, Luxembourg and Germany. Caesar described the Druids as having great authority and being involved in matters both religious and judicial. He also mentioned they held annual gatherings in the territory of the Carnutes, roughly in today's central France. Sounds like a fun conference, minus the PowerPoint presentations and awkward icebreakers. But why should we take Caesar's words with a pinch of salt? Well, for starters, he was keen on portraying the Gauls as barbaric and in need of Roman civilization, i.e. his own brand of rule. His writings served as both a justification for his military campaigns and a bit of PR for the folks back home. So while he paints Druids as influential figures who conducted human sacrifices, yikes, there's reason to believe he might have been exaggerating to make Roman intervention seem more palatable. After all, we invaded to stop human sacrifices? Sounds a lot more noble than we fancy their land and resources. Beyond Caesar, we rely on Roman historians like Pliny the Elder and Tacitus, who also had their biases but provide additional insights. Pliny, for example, was fascinated by their rituals and noted their use of mistletoe, which has since become more associated with awkward holiday kisses than ancient ceremonies. Tacitus, writing about the Druids in Britain, described them as fierce defenders of their sacred groves, which the Romans were all too happy to chop down. It's like a historical game of rock, paper, scissors, except here legionary beats tree worshipper. Despite these sources, the Druids remain shrouded in mystery, partly because the Celts themselves were an oral culture. They preferred storytelling and memorization over writing things down, which would make any modern student weep with envy over their mnemonic skills. This oral tradition means much of their knowledge was passed down through generations by word of mouth, like a really intense game of telephone where the stakes were cosmic understanding rather than who spilled the milk. The Druids played significant roles in their societies beyond just being the neighborhood mystics. They operated as judges, settling disputes and doling out justice with a side of wisdom. They were the intellectual elite, the philosophers of their time, pondering the nature of the universe, while everyone else was busy just trying to survive. They also served as teachers, passing down knowledge of astronomy, law, and natural philosophy, which makes them sound a bit like your favorite college professor, if your professor wore robes and hung out in the woods. Their influence wasn't just confined to the spiritual realm, they were politically savvy too. In some cases they acted as advisors to chieftains and kings, wielding soft power in the form of counsel and prophecy. Think of them as the ancient equivalent of a political think tank, only with more beards and fewer spreadsheets. This blend of roles made them indispensable to Celtic society, a fact not lost on the Romans who, upon conquering, often tried to undermine or co-opt these influential figures to cement their own control. So, while the Druids might conjure images of mystics whispering secrets to the trees, they were very much a product of their time, deeply embedded in the social and political fabric of Celtic life. They were respected and sometimes feared, living embodiments of the complex interplay between nature, religion, and power. As we dig deeper into the rituals and practices in the coming parts, it's essential to carry with us this nuanced understanding of their origins and societal roles. It's a reminder that in history, much like in life, the truth is often more intricate than the tales we first hear. As we continue this journey through the foggy moors of Celtic history, let's zero in on the daily life of the Druids. Picture them not as mystical beings floating through the forests with ethereal grace, but as real people with real responsibilities. The Druids were the Renaissance men of their time, long before the Renaissance was cool. Their day-to-day existence was a balancing act of various roles, judges, teachers, political advisors, and more. If they had business cards, they'd need a folding map to fit all their titles. Being a Druid wasn't just about chanting spells or deciphering the cosmic secrets of the universe. These folks were the legal experts of their day. They presided over disputes like a toga-clad Judge Judy, though with considerably more gravitas and fewer commercial breaks. The Druids held the power to settle everything from land arguments to familial spats, and their decisions were binding. No appeals court here, folks. Their judgments were the law, and their ability to interpret it made them indispensable. Education was another cornerstone of Druid life. They were the gatekeepers of knowledge in a world where you couldn't just Google your way out of a problem. Druidic education was rigorous, to say the least. Think of it as a cross between Hogwarts and a grueling legal apprenticeship. Potential Druids spent up to 20 years in training, memorizing verse after verse, law after law. No cheat sheets or textbooks, just pure, unadulterated brainpower. It's enough to make your average undergrad weep into their ramen noodles. This oral tradition was the lifeline of their culture, preserving everything from astronomical observations to the genealogies of noble families. So, the next time you complain about remembering your passwords, spare a thought for these ancient memory athletes. But why all the secrecy and memorization? Well, the Celts believed that writing down their law could somehow diminish its power, making it accessible to those who shouldn't have it, like an ancient form of DRM. Plus, there was the practical concern of keeping their knowledge out of the hands of nosy Roman conquerors. After all, there's nothing like a power-hungry empire to make you guard your secrets. Beyond their legal and educational duties, Druids held sway in the political sphere, wielding influence not just through wisdom, but also through the perception of divine insight. Kings and chieftains often turned to Druids for guidance, hoping to tap into their purported ability to commune with the gods. Whether or not they actually possessed such powers is up for debate, but their influence was undoubtedly real. They were the kingmakers behind the scenes, shaping policy and decisions with a well-timed prophecy or an insightful piece of advice. Who needs Machiavelli when you've got a Druid in the corner? Of course, this influence came with its own set of dangers. Being close to power is a double-edged sword after all. While they enjoyed a high status in society, they also had to tread carefully. Aligning with the wrong faction could spell disaster, and not just for the Druid. Political intrigue was as much a part of their world as it is in today's corridors of power. And let's not forget the ever-present risk of Roman interference. The Romans weren't exactly fans of the Druids, viewing them as obstacles to their civilizing mission. It's no wonder that Druids often found themselves targeted in Rome's attempts to assimilate and subjugate Celtic societies. Socially, Druids were a class apart. They didn't pay taxes, which probably made them popular at parties, and they were exempt from military service. A perk that must have been particularly appealing in an era where getting conscripted was as common as catching the common cold. But all these privileges came with a price. Their role required them to live a life of discipline, dedication, and occasionally danger. Their influence was largely intangible, based on respect and fear rather than wealth or military might. It was a precarious position, reliant on the goodwill of those in power and the trust of the people they served. The Druids' connection to nature was more than just a romantic notion, it was central to their identity and their duties. They were the original ecologists, understanding the rhythms of the natural world and the cycles of life and death. Their ceremonies often involved elements of nature, and they saw themselves as intermediaries between the earthly and the divine. This bond with nature was both a source of strength and a reason for their eventual persecution. As the Roman Empire expanded, its tolerance for such pagan practices waned, and the sacred groves of the Druids were seen as threats to Roman order. Despite their prominence, the Druids faced significant logistical challenges. Imagine trying to manage a society's legal, educational, and spiritual needs without so much as a papyrus scroll to jot things down. Their reliance on oral tradition meant that they had to be both meticulous and creative in how they preserved and passed on knowledge. It's a testament to their skill that so much of it survived, albeit through the lens of their conquerors. In essence, the Druids were the embodiment of their society's values and fears. They were revered and respected, yet always on the edge of danger. Whether seen as wise sages or dangerous subversives, their presence left an indelible mark on Celtic culture and beyond. As we dive deeper into their rituals and practices, keep in mind these complexities. The Druids were not just relics of a bygone era, they were living, breathing agents of their time, caught in the ever-shifting tides of history. And while we might never fully unravel the mysteries of their world, exploring these ancient threads helps us understand the rich tapestry of human experience, a tapestry woven with both the tangible and the mystical, the real and the imagined. Stay tuned as we continue our journey into the enigmatic world of the Druids, where the lines between myth and reality are as entwined as the branches of their sacred oaks. Let's dive deeper into the world where the Druids orchestrated their mysterious and iconic rituals. You know, the kind that have modern-day romantics envisioning moonlit dances and mystical chants. But before we get swept away by poetic imaginings of deer antlers and ethereal forests, let's grab our historical magnifying glass and sift through fact and fiction like we're looking for loose change under the couch cushions. First up, the oak tree, a symbol as sturdy as your old Nokia phone. The Druids revered oaks with a kind of reverence that would make a tree hugger blush. The oak wasn't just any tree, it was the holy grail of the Celtic world. It was believed to be a conduit to the divine, a leafy antenna directly tuned to nature's channel. The Druids, whose name partially derives from Dru or oak knower, would gather beneath these mighty trees for ceremonies that seemed straight out of a fantasy novel. But were they really clapping antlers under the moonlight? Spoiler alert, not so much. The notion of Druids prancing around with antlers struck to their heads comes more from 18th century romanticism than any solid historical evidence. It's the kind of imagery that makes for great storybook illustrations, but lacks the cold, hard facts we love to dissect. These romanticized visions were largely concocted by writers and artists who were more interested in selling books and paintings than in scholarly accuracy. They were captivated by the mysterious allure of the Druids and weren't too concerned with the nitty-gritty details. So, while we're all for a bit of whimsy, let's not let it cloud our understanding of these ancient practices. Now, let's talk about that other Druidic staple, mistletoe. Today, it's the plant that awkwardly forces holiday party-goers into unwanted kisses, but back in the day, it was a symbol of life and fertility. The Druids believed mistletoe, especially when found growing on oaks, was a sacred plant. They'd harvest it with a golden sickle. Yep, gold, because why not be fabulously extra about it and use it in various rites and concoctions? Pliny the Elder, a Roman writer with a penchant for hyperbole, gave us one of the more vivid accounts of this ritual. According to him, the Druids would ascend the oak trees to snip the mistletoe on the 6th day of the moon cycle, which sounds pretty precise until you realize he was likely recounting tales from a distant land with limited first-hand experience. Still, the mistletoe's role as a symbol of life amidst winter's barrenness speaks volumes about the Celtic worldview where nature's cycles were intimately tied to survival. These rituals weren't just about nature admiration, though they did have a practical side. The Druids' ceremonies often coincided with important agricultural cycles, reflecting the tight bond between spiritual practices and the community's economic well-being. A good harvest was critical for survival, and what better way to ensure the gods of nature were on your side than a well-timed ceremony under an ancient oak? It was less about the spectacle and more about the practical need to appease forces beyond their control. Think of it as a cosmic insurance policy, with the Druids acting as intermediaries to secure favorable outcomes. The political implications of these rituals were as significant as their economic ones. In a society where the divine was woven tightly into the fabric of daily life, the Druids wielded power not just through their knowledge, but through their perceived ability to influence the gods. A successful ceremony could reinforce the status of a ruler, while a failed one might be seen as a sign of divine displeasure. Thus, the Druids had a kind of political clout that today's lobbyists would envy. They were the spiritual advisors with a hotline to the heavens, and their endorsement could make or break a leader's legitimacy. But let's not forget the Romans, who viewed such rituals with a mix of fascination and disdain. To them, these practices were vestiges of barbarism, proof of the Celts' need for Roman enlightenment. The Romans' systematic dismantling of Druidic power, including their sacred rites, was as much about cultural domination as it was about military conquest. By undermining the Druids, the Romans aimed to erode a pillar of Celtic society, smoothing the path for their own brand of civilization. It was a classic case of out with the old, in with the new, albeit with decidedly more bloodshed. So, while the image of antlered Druids prancing under moonlit skies is charming, the reality was a bit more grounded. The Druids' rituals were deeply rooted in the practicalities of their world, intricately linked to both the economic cycles and the political machinations of their time. They were less about whimsical mysticism and more about ensuring survival and maintaining influence. As we continue to uncover the layers of their enigmatic history, it's clear that the Druids were far more integral to their society than any romanticized narrative could capture. Their rituals, like the oaks they revered, were deeply rooted in the realities of the world around them, serving as both a reflection of and a response to the challenges of their era. And as we peel back more layers of this ancient onion, we'll continue to see how their legacy echoes through time, in ways both mundane and magical. As the Roman boot pressed harder on the Celtic lands, the Druids found themselves in a bit of a pickle. Imagine the scene. 1 minute, you're the spiritual backbone of Celtic society. The next, you're dodging Roman legions like they're a particularly aggressive neighborhood watch. The Roman invasion, which kicked off in earnest around 43 AD under Emperor Claudius, wasn't just about flexing military might, it was also a cultural bulldozer, flattening local traditions to pave the way for Roman rule. And guess what was standing right in the path of this juggernaut? Yep, our friends the Druids. The Romans, ever the efficiency experts, weren't just interested in annexing land, they wanted to assimilate people. And for the Druids, that spelled trouble. Their influence ran deep, political, judicial, spiritual, and the Romans weren't keen on sharing power. So, they embarked on a campaign to dismantle Druidic influence, targeting their sacred sites and outlawing their practices. It was like banning apple pie in America, an assault on something fundamental. Key Druidic strongholds, like the island of Anglesey in Wales, were attacked, their sacred groves destroyed in a bid to sever the Druids' connection with their divine channels. The Romans weren't just cutting down trees, they were hacking away at the roots of Celtic society. But the Druids weren't exactly rolling over. They adapted, or at least tried to. Some went underground, keeping their traditions alive in secrecy. Others attempted to integrate with Roman society, swapping their robes for togas and their oak groves for more Roman-friendly venues. It was a bit like trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, but hey, when your existence is on the line, you get creative. Still, the process was anything but seamless. The Romans weren't just bringing military might, they were also introducing new gods, new laws, and a different way of life that left little room for old Celtic customs. Enter Christianity, stage right. Just when the Druids thought things couldn't get any more complicated, along comes this newfangled religion, with its promise of salvation and a one-size-fits-all deity. Christianity's arrival, which began in earnest in the 4th century AD, was like a cultural tidal wave, sweeping across Europe with a zeal that would make a door-to-door vacuum salesman proud. The Druids, already reeling from Roman suppression, found themselves further marginalized as Celtic societies began to embrace this new faith. Christianity's appeal wasn't just spiritual, it offered a unifying force in a fractured world. The Romans, having adopted Christianity as the state religion by 380 AD, found it a useful tool for consolidating their power. And for the Celts, who were tired of being on the losing side, converting to Christianity was a strategic move. It offered a way to align with the Roman Empire, the biggest game in town. Plus, the promise of eternal life wasn't a shabby selling point either. But what of the Druids? Well, as Christianity spread, their influence continued to wane. Some Druids tried to adapt, blending their old beliefs with the new Christian doctrine in a sort of spiritual fusion cuisine. Others faded into obscurity, their traditions surviving only in whispers and fragmented memories. The loss was profound, not just for the Druids, but for Celtic culture as a whole. It was as if an entire world view, one that saw humanity as part of a greater natural order, was being overwritten by a new narrative. Archaeological finds offer tantalizing glimpses into this period of transition. Take, for example, the Lindo Man, discovered in a peat bog in Cheshire, England, in 1984. This well-preserved body, dating back to the 1st century AD, bears signs of ritualistic killing, perhaps a Druidic sacrifice? Or was it a Roman execution, a warning to those clinging to the old ways? The jury's still out, but the discovery underscores the tension of the era, where old and new worlds collided. Historical records, too, provide clues about the Druids' gradual fade. Roman writers like Tacitus noted the destruction of Druidic sites, while later Christian chroniclers often painted the Druids in a mystical, almost mythical light. By the Middle Ages, the Druids had become figures of legend, their real history obscured by layers of myth and romanticism. It's as if history itself conspired to turn these once influential figures into shadowy ghosts haunting the fringes of medieval imagination. And yet, the Druids' legacy endures, reshaped and reimagined over the centuries. In the 18th and 19th centuries, as Europe grappled with industrialization and a longing for the pastoral past, the romantic image of the Druid was resurrected. They were cast as wise sages, keepers of ancient secrets, a nostalgic nod to a simpler time. It's the kind of narrative that sells well in novels and paintings, even if it glosses over the gritty realities of their decline. So, as we peer through the mists of time, what do we see? A complex picture of adaptation and loss, of cultural transformation and survival. The Druids, once central to Celtic life, were edged out by forces beyond their control, the might of Rome, the allure of Christianity. Yet their story is more than just an account of decline. It's a testament to the enduring power of human culture, how it evolves and adapts, leaving traces of the past even as it marches toward the future. And while the Druids may no longer chant beneath the oaks, their echoes remain, a reminder of a world where nature and spirit were inseparably intertwined. As we continue to unravel their legacy, we'll delve deeper into how these ancient echoes still reverberate in our world today. Stay tuned for the next chapter, where we'll explore the enduring myths and modern reinterpretations of the Druidic tradition. In today's world, the Druids have staged a kind of cultural comeback worthy of a rock band reuniting for one last major tour. They're popping up everywhere, from blockbuster movies and fantasy novels to modern spiritual movements, leaving us to ponder just why these ancient figures hold such enduring allure. Are we just suckers for nostalgia, or is there something deeper at play here? First, let's tackle the pop culture phenomenon. Druids have been cast as everything from wise, staff-wielding mentors in fantasy epics to mysterious forest dwellers in TV series. They're like the Swiss Army knife of mystical archetypes, versatile, mysterious, and equipped with enough historical vagueness to be molded into whatever shape the story needs. Take The Lord of the Rings, where Gandalf, though technically a wizard, borrows heavily from Druidic imagery with his deep connection to nature and wisdom beyond mortal understanding. Fantasy games like Dungeons & Dragons, with its Druid class, further cement this image, allowing players to wield nature magic and transform into animals. It's a romanticized vision, sure, but it taps into a fundamental human desire, a longing for wisdom and a connection to something greater than ourselves. And then there's the modern Druidry movement. Believe it or not, there are people today who identify as Druids, practicing a spiritual tradition inspired by, though not directly descended from, ancient Celtic practices. Organizations like the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, founded in 1964, offer a structured path for those seeking to explore this spiritual avenue. These modern Druids emphasize respect for nature, personal growth, and a quest for wisdom principles that resonate with many seeking solace from the hustle and bustle of modern life. It's estimated that there are around 10,000 practicing Druids worldwide, a modest number perhaps, but one that underscores the persistent appeal of these ancient frameworks in a world often disconnected from the natural world. So, why are we so fascinated by these figures? Part of it stems from their mystique. The Druids are shrouded in mystery, their true practices obscured by time and Roman propaganda. This lack of concrete details allows us to project our own hopes and dreams onto them, turning them into a canvas for our imagination. In a world full of certainty and information overload, the Druids offer a tantalizing hint of the unknown, a chance to ponder the mysteries of the universe without the burden of definitive answers. Moreover, the Druids speak to a deeper yearning for connection. In an age where technology often distances us from the natural world, the Druidic emphasis on harmony with nature strikes a chord. It's a reminder of a time when humanity's survival was intimately tied to the rhythms of the earth, when the cycles of the moon and the changing seasons weren't just calendar entries but vital factors in daily life. The modern environmental movement echoes this sentiment, drawing parallels with the Druidic reverence for nature and underscoring the urgency of reconnecting with the planet we call home. But let's not get too misty-eyed. While the romanticized image of the Druid is certainly appealing, it's crucial to approach their history with a critical eye. The Druids, as we've explored, were products of their time, politically savvy, economically astute, and deeply entwined with the social structures of Celtic society. They were not just tree-hugging mystics, but influential figures whose power extended into the judicial and political realms. By romanticizing their image without acknowledging these complexities, we risk turning them into caricatures, losing sight of the real lessons their history offers. Engaging critically with the past also means recognizing the role of power dynamics in shaping historical narratives. The Romans' portrayal of the Druids as barbaric and in need of suppression was, after all, a convenient justification for conquest. By examining these biases, we gain a clearer understanding of how history is written by the victors and how those narratives continue to shape our perceptions today. In essence, the Druid story is a testament to the enduring power of myth and memory. They're a reminder of humanity's eternal search for meaning, our quest to understand our place in the cosmos. Whether viewed as mystical sages or political operators, the Druids offer us a lens through which to examine our own values and aspirations, and as we continue to explore their legacy, we're challenged to separate fact from fiction, to appreciate the richness of history without getting lost in its romantic allure. So, the next time you find yourself caught in the thrall of a Druidic tale, remember that it's not just a story of ancient rituals and sacred groves. It's a reflection of our own search for wisdom and connection, a journey through the past that illuminates the present. And as we navigate the complexities of modern life, perhaps we can draw inspiration from these ancient figures, finding ways to harmonize with the world around us and seek wisdom in unexpected places. Whether or not we choose to don a robe and wander into the woods, the spirit of the Druids lives on, inviting us to explore the mysteries of life with curiosity and wonder. If you think the Marvel Cinematic Universe has an impressive backstory, wait until you hear about the Dreamtime. This isn't a cinematic universe. It's a cosmic saga that's been running for over 65,000 years, long before anyone thought to call a kangaroo Skippy. We're talking about the spiritual journeys of Aboriginal Australia, where the origins of the world are narrated not in pixels, but in stories that predate written language. The Dreamtime, or The Dreaming, is a bit like an ancient Netflix series, only without the subscription fees and with a plotline so complex it would make even the most committed Game of Thrones fans' heads spin. These aren't just stories. They form the backbone of life, law and land for Aboriginal peoples. Imagine a series of interconnected narratives that explain everything from the creation of the earth to why the emu can't fly. Forget the Big Bang. This is the cultural equivalent of an ongoing cosmic explosion. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, or should I say, the rainbow serpent. Dreamtime stories are often served up in modern retellings like they're some kind of spiritual fast food, quick, easy, and stripped of all nutritional value. These myths are painted as simplistic tales about animals and landscapes, but that's like saying Shakespeare was just a guy who wrote about people in tights. The truth is, Dreamtime stories are layered with social meanings and environmental wisdom that are as intricate as a didgeridoo solo. Take the foundational myths that vary from tribe to tribe across this vast continent. Australia isn't exactly your average backyard. We're talking about a landmass of 7.692 million square kilometres, home to hundreds of Aboriginal groups, each with its own dialect and spiritual narrative. These stories weren't just cooked up around a campfire for entertainment. They were, and still are, the bedrock of Aboriginal society. They outline the laws, the ethics, and even the geography, blending the physical and spiritual realms like a cosmic smoothie. For instance, one Dreamtime story tells of how the sun was created when the emu spirit threw a fiery ball across the sky. If that sounds like an ancient version of baseball, then maybe it is. But it's more than just a game. It explains the sunrise, the heat of the day, and the emu's role in the ecosystem. It's like a National Geographic documentary, but with better storytelling and far fewer camera crews. Yet, despite their depth and complexity, these stories have often been reduced in modern retellings to something akin to children's bedtime tales. It's like describing the Mona Lisa as just a picture of a woman with a weird smile. These narratives are not just about quirky animal adventures. They are sophisticated allegories that encompass relationships between people, their environment, and the cosmos. They're not just telling you how the world was created, they're also telling you how to live in it. Aboriginal spirituality isn't just about a connection to the land, it's a profound understanding of it. The dreaming stories weave together the social and ecological fabric of Aboriginal life, demonstrating how to live sustainably, a lesson that, let's be honest, the modern world could use a crash course in. These stories are the original environmental impact studies, done without the need for government grants or PowerPoint presentations. The dreaming also challenges the Western notion of time itself. While we're busy checking our calendars and setting reminders, Aboriginal spirituality suggests that time is a more fluid concept. The past, present, and future are interconnected. Dreamtime isn't something that happened once upon a time. It's happening now, a living narrative that continues to evolve. Try explaining that to someone who thinks history is just a list of dates to memorize. In the Dreamtime, the world was shaped by ancestral beings who crossed the land and left behind trails, mountains, rivers, and stories. These beings are often depicted as animals or natural elements, embodying the spiritual essence of the land itself. So, when you're hiking in the Australian outback, you're not just stepping on dirt, you're walking on a tapestry of stories that have been told and retold for millennia. And like any good story, there are lessons to be learned and morals to ponder. These myths aren't just about explaining how the kangaroo got its pouch. They're about teaching respect for the natural world and understanding one's place within it. They highlight the importance of kinship, community, and the stewardship of resources. In a world where we often forget to recycle, these narratives are as relevant as ever. So, next time you hear a Dreamtime story, don't just nod along like you're listening to the latest pop hit. Dig deeper, and you'll find a complex web of social, environmental, and spiritual wisdom that's been curated over thousands of generations. It's easy to romanticize these tales as quaint folklore, but there's so much more than that. They're a guidebook to a life lived in harmony with the world. In sum, the Dreamtime is not just a relic of the past, it's a living, breathing testament to the resilience and wisdom of Aboriginal cultures. It's a reminder that sometimes the most profound truths are those that have been with us all along, patiently waiting for us to listen and learn. As we continue this journey through the spiritual landscapes of Australia, remember, the stories might seem ancient, but their messages are timeless. And who knows? You might just find the answers to questions you didn't even know you were asking. And just when you thought we'd covered the mystical terrain, let's turn our attention to songlines, the original Google Maps of Aboriginal Australia. Forget Wi-Fi. These spiritual tracks have been crisscrossing the continent long before anyone asked, "Can you hear me now?" Picture this. A complex system of invisible highways that not only tell you where you're going, but also why you're going there, and they do it all with a soundtrack. Songlines, or dreaming tracks, are the ultimate multitaskers, wrapping navigation, history, and spirituality into one neat package. Now, I know what you're thinking. Invisible tracks? Sounds like a fairy tale. But these aren't just flights of fancy. They are as real as the phone in your pocket, if not more reliable. Songlines are essentially aural maps, passed down through generations, with each verse in a song corresponding to a specific geographic feature. Imagine a melody that guides you from one waterhole to another, or from a mountain to a sacred site, all while imparting the wisdom of the ages. It's like your GPS app decided to throw in a life lesson or two while directing you to the nearest gas station. What's truly mind-boggling is the sheer scope of these songlines. They stretch across the Australian landscape, connecting communities over vast distances. And when I say vast, I mean vast. Australia is about 7.7 million square kilometres, and these tracks weave through it like a spider web spun by an overachiever. They serve as a testament to the Aboriginal people's intimate knowledge of the land and their ability to navigate it long before the advent of modern technology. You could say they were eco-friendly travellers, no carbon footprint, just footprints. But songlines are more than just maps, they're also stories. Each line tells part of a narrative, a chapter in the saga of the Dreamtime. They're like ancient audiobooks, but instead of a narrator with a smooth voice, you've got a community singing in harmony. And trust me, these are not your average top 40 hits. They're epic anthems that cover everything from the location of food sources to moral codes. These songs are a living library, with each note preserving history and cultural identity in a way that would make even the most dedicated librarian blush. Now, let's debunk some myths while we're at it. Modern portrayals often reduce songlines to quaint folklore, the kind of thing you might find charming in a travel brochure. But this is like describing the internet as just a series of tubes. The reality is far more intricate. Songlines are not just whimsical ditties, they're sophisticated systems that manage to blend practical knowledge with spiritual significance. They're the Swiss Army knife of Aboriginal culture, versatile, essential, and ingeniously designed. One of the most fascinating aspects of songlines is their role in social structures. They're not just about getting from point A to point B, they're about connection, both to the land and to each other. Songlines often overlap, creating networks that link different communities. Imagine a massive social media platform, but instead of cat memes and political rants, you've got songs that unite people across hundreds of miles. These connections were crucial for trade, marriage alliances, and cultural exchange. In a land as expansive as Australia, maintaining these links was vital for survival. And let's not forget the rock stars of the songlines, the landscape itself. In Aboriginal culture, landforms are not just backdrops, they're players in the narrative. Every rock, tree, and waterhole has a story, a role in the grand drama of the Dreamtime. Understanding these elements is key to navigating both the physical and spiritual worlds. It's as if each geological feature is a chapter in a book, and once you've read it, you're one step closer to understanding the universe, or at least finding a reliable source of water. Speaking of water, let's dive into the economic context. In the harsh Australian outback, knowing where to find water can mean the difference between life and death. Songlines often point the way to these precious resources, making them indispensable tools for survival. In a landscape where rain is as rare as a unicorn sighting, these songs provide a roadmap to sustainability. It's a real-world application of spiritual wisdom, an ancient method of resource management that predates modern techniques by thousands of years. Yet, despite their importance, songlines have often been overlooked in mainstream narratives. They're relegated to the realm of curiosity, something exotic and otherworldly. But let's face it, if we put as much stock in oral traditions as we do in written ones, we might just learn a thing or two about resilience and adaptability. These tracks are not relics of a bygone era, they're living, breathing entities that continue to shape the lives of Aboriginal communities today. So next time you find yourself lost in the concrete jungle, consider the wisdom of the songlines. They remind us that knowledge doesn't always come in the form of books or bytes. Sometimes it's in the songs we sing, the stories we tell, and the landscapes we traverse. As we continue to explore the spiritual journeys of Aboriginal Australia, let's keep our eyes and ears open. After all, you never know what truths might be waiting to be discovered just beneath the surface. Yet, as we journey through the tapestry of songlines and Dreamtime, there's an elephant-sized issue lurking in the room, the clash between the sacred and the secular. You see, the connection between Aboriginal spirituality and the land is not merely symbolic, it's as tangible as the soil underfoot. But when the spiritual meets the modern economic monster, we're left with a battleground as contested as a Black Friday sale. Let's start by dissecting the not-so-romantic notion of the noble savage, a term that makes the rounds like an unwanted guest at a party. It paints Aboriginal people as mystical guardians of the earth, living in some kind of perpetual Eden. But here's the kicker. This image is as accurate as a politician's promise. It ignores the complex, adaptive societies that not only thrived, but also innovated in one of the planet's harshest environments. Aboriginal cultures were, and are, dynamic and pragmatic, not just sitting around waiting for the modern world to bulldoze through their sacred sites. Speaking of bulldozers, let's chew over the legal and political skirmishes surrounding land rights. Imagine a sacred site, a place steeped in stories older than the pyramids, a spiritual nexus for communities. Now picture that land being eyed by mining companies like a kid in a candy store. We're talking billions of dollars on the line here, with the Australian mining industry worth a staggering $202 billion in 2020 alone. It's tempting to see it as a simple battle between tradition and progress, but the reality is messier than a spaghetti-eating contest. The landmark case of Mabo v Queensland No. 2 in 1992 was a game-changer, like the unexpected hit at a summer blockbuster. This High Court ruling recognised the concept of native title, finally acknowledging that Aboriginal peoples had rights to the land long before Captain Cook decided to drop anchor and call dibs. It overturned the legal fiction of terra nullius, which had conveniently declared Australia as an empty continent ripe for the taking. But let's not kid ourselves, the battle was far from over. Recognising land rights is one thing, enforcing them is akin to herding cats. Fast forward to more recent times, and the legal landscape is littered with cases where Aboriginal claims clash with corporate interests. Take the Juukan Gorge controversy of 2020, where a sacred 46,000-year-old site was destroyed by a mining company despite knowing its cultural significance. Talk about a PR disaster, it was like burning a library to make room for a parking lot. The outrage was palpable, but it highlighted a persistent issue, the power imbalance where economic gain often trumps cultural preservation. And it's not just about mines. Real estate developers, agricultural expansions, even tourism ventures have staked claims on lands that hold deep spiritual value. It's a David and Goliath scenario with a twist. Goliath has the backing of legal loopholes and cash reserves, while David wields a slingshot of cultural heritage. The Yorta Yorta case in the late 1990s and early 2000s is a classic example where native title claims were dismissed due to an insufficient ongoing connection to the land as judged by Western legal standards. It's like being asked to prove you're part of a family because you missed a few Thanksgiving dinners. Now, let's sprinkle in some economic context, because what's a story without a dose of cash flow? Aboriginal communities often face stark economic challenges, with unemployment rates more than double the national average and income levels trailing behind. When presented with development deals, the allure of financial security can be as hard to resist as the last piece of cake at a party. But these deals often come with strings attached, like a gift that turns out to be a Trojan horse. Amidst these challenges, there are glimmers of hope initiatives where traditional knowledge and modern frameworks join forces like a superhero team-up. Co-management agreements in national parks, for instance, are paving the way for sustainable practices that respect both ecological and cultural values. The Kakadu National Park is a shining example, where Aboriginal rangers and scientists work hand in hand to preserve biodiversity while keeping cultural narratives alive and kicking. So, where does this leave us? The struggle for land rights and the preservation of sacred sites is a high-stakes game of tug-of-war, where each pull on the rope is loaded with historical context and contemporary implications. It's a reminder that the past is never truly past. It's woven into the fabric of today's political and economic landscapes. And as we navigate these complex terrains, it's crucial to remember that the stories we walk on are not just chapters of history, they are living narratives demanding respect and recognition. As we wrap up this part of our journey, ponder this: the land is more than just dirt and rocks. It's an archive of culture, a spiritual canvas, and a battleground where the notion of progress is constantly questioned. Stay tuned, because this story is far from over. We've got more ground to cover, more myths to bust, and more truths to uncover as we continue exploring the spiritual and historical landscapes of Aboriginal Australia. So if you thought we were done untangling the knotty mess of Aboriginal history, buckle up, because we're about to dive into a chapter as tangled as a plate of spaghetti, only with the added spice of colonialism. If you think colonization was a quaint exchange of tea and crumpets, you're in for a wake-up call. It was more like a cultural bulldozer, and spoiler alert, it didn't roll over without resistance. Let's rewind the clock to the late 18th and 19th centuries, when the British decided Australia was the perfect spot to dump their overflow of convicts, and perhaps a few unwanted family members. Forget the serene beaches and picturesque landscapes. The newcomers were more interested in claiming land and resources than in understanding the spiritual tapestry that had sustained Aboriginal societies for millennia. To them, the Dreamtime might as well have been an episode of Lost. Colonizers, with all the subtlety of a bull in a china shop, saw Aboriginal spiritual practices as pagan rituals in need of a good old Christian makeover. Ceremonies were banned outright, often under the guise of saving souls. But let's be real, it was about control. By the late 1800s, policies like the Aboriginal Protection Act were less about protection and more about assimilation, or as it's sometimes bluntly called, cultural erasure. The authorities believed if they could just scrub out those pesky Aboriginal customs, a civilized society would miraculously emerge as if by magic. And so began the disbanding of sacred ceremonies, often seen as the heartbeat of cultural and spiritual life. The Corroborees, for instance, were gatherings that combined dance, music, and storytelling, serving as both entertainment and education. Imagine a festival that doubled as a university lecture, only with less student debt and more didgeridoos. By banning these gatherings, colonizers aimed to dismantle the social cohesion that had kept Aboriginal communities thriving. It was like trying to tear down a house by stealing the family photos. But here's where things get interesting. Aboriginal peoples didn't just roll over and play dead. Instead, they got creative. Some ceremonies went underground, carried out in secret, away from the prying eyes of colonial authorities. It was cultural resistance wrapped in a cloak of invisibility. Others adapted their practices, integrating elements of Christian rituals to fly under the radar, a kind of spiritual sleight of hand. You could say they were the original cultural hackers, managing to keep their traditions alive despite systematic efforts to erase them. Consider the role of language in spiritual practices. Many Dreamtime stories and songs are in native tongues, and when those languages were suppressed or lost, so too were the stories. Yet, in an act of defiance as subtle as a side-eye, some communities began weaving English words into their songs and stories, ensuring that the essence of their narratives survived. It's like adding a secret ingredient to a recipe, ensuring the flavor remains even when the dish changes. Fast forward to the 20th century, and the cultural landscape was as tumultuous as ever. The Stolen Generations, an era from approximately 1910 to 1970, when Aboriginal children were forcibly removed from their families, was an attempt to sever the connection to culture at its roots. It was a policy as misguided as it was brutal, and the impacts are still felt today, with many seeking to reclaim lost identities and languages. It's a testament to human resilience that despite these efforts, many have managed to reconnect with their heritage, like piecing together a shattered vase. Economically, the impact of colonization was equally dire. The introduction of European agriculture and land management practices disrupted traditional food sources and trade routes. Aboriginal communities, once self-sufficient, were often pushed to the fringes both literally and economically. By the mid-20th century, they were grappling with unemployment rates that were through the roof, double or triple that of non-Indigenous Australians. In a stark twist of irony, the very people who had sustainably managed the land for tens of thousands of years were now marginalised on it. Yet against these odds, cultural survival strategies emerged like flowers through cracks in concrete. In recent decades, there's been a revival of interest in Aboriginal practices, both within and outside of these communities. Festivals celebrating Aboriginal art, dance and storytelling have sprung up, showcasing the richness of these traditions. It's an act of cultural resurgence that defies the odds, a reminder that you can't erase a culture as deeply rooted as the eucalyptus trees. The economic benefits of this cultural revival are not lost either. Aboriginal art, for example, is a booming industry. It's not just about pretty pictures. These works are imbued with narratives that convey spiritual and historical significance. In 2019, the global market for Aboriginal art was estimated to be worth around $200 million. It's a modern twist on an ancient practice, where the stories of the Dreamtime find new audiences around the world, reminding everyone that these tales are as relevant today as they ever were. And so, the story of Aboriginal spirituality and its survival is one of tenacity, adaptation, and ingenuity. It's a narrative of cultural resilience that defies the erasure attempts of colonization. As we move forward, this tale continues to unfold, offering lessons in perseverance and the power of storytelling. Hold tight, because in the next part, we'll delve into the contemporary landscapes where these ancient practices continue to evolve, proving that history is never just a thing of the past. And so, the story of Aboriginal spirituality and its survival is one of tenacity, adaptation, and ingenuity. As we march into the vibrant tapestry of contemporary Aboriginal life, it's clear that this isn't just about cultural survival, it's a renaissance that dances to the beat of both ancient and modern rhythms. So, what does this mean for young Aboriginal Australians today? Well, grab your metaphorical time-travelling surfboard, because we're about to ride the wave of a cultural fusion that's as dynamic as it is profound. Imagine being a young Aboriginal Australian in the 21st century, navigating a world where your smartphone might sit right next to a traditional clapstick on your nightstand. It's a scene that neatly encapsulates the blending of old and new, where cultural heritage meets contemporary reality. This fusion is not a mere balancing act, it's a full-blown symphony of innovation and tradition. Take, for example, the rising popularity of contemporary Aboriginal art and music. The industry is not only thriving but booming, with Aboriginal art alone contributing nearly $100 million annually to the Australian economy. It's proof that these ancient practices are far from museum pieces. They're living, breathing art forms that resonate globally. But this isn't just about art. It's about a deeper, more spiritual connection to the land and the stories that have been sung for millennia. Young Aboriginal Australians are increasingly engaging with their cultural roots, weaving traditional Dreamtime stories into modern narratives. And this isn't just happening in the arts. In politics, there's a growing movement to recognise the sovereignty of Aboriginal peoples, a push as vital and urgent as finding Wi-Fi in a blackout. The Uluru Statement from the Heart, delivered in 2017, called for a First Nations voice enshrined in the Australian Constitution. It was a plea for recognition and a demand for agency, an acknowledgement that the voices which have long been silenced deserve a seat at the table. Yet, the fight for cultural recognition is not without its hurdles. Enter the economic dragon, a beast that can either be a friend or foe. For many Aboriginal communities, economic development offers a double-edged sword. On one side, it's an opportunity for prosperity. On the other, it's a threat to the very land that is so spiritually significant. Consider the ongoing debates over land use and mining rights. In 2021, the Australian mining industry was worth a staggering $243 billion, but at what cost? The destruction of sacred sites like Juukan Gorge is a poignant reminder that economic gain often comes at a cultural price. It's a high-stakes game of chess, where each move could mean the loss of a piece of heritage that money simply can't buy back. In the midst of this, young Aboriginal Australians are finding creative ways to bridge the gap between tradition and modernity. Digital platforms have become unlikely allies, with social media serving as a megaphone for cultural expression and activism. Hashtags and viral campaigns are the new corroborees, spreading awareness and galvanizing support at speeds that would leave even the nimblest emu in the dust. It's a digital Dreamtime, where stories and social justice collide in a space that's as accessible as it is powerful. Yet, as we revel in the romance of this cultural renaissance, let's not lose sight of the harsh realities that persist. Despite the vibrant resurgence of Aboriginal culture, systemic inequalities remain as entrenched as a stubborn eucalyptus root. Aboriginal Australians still face disproportionate levels of poverty and disadvantage. Unemployment rates stand at 18%, more than triple the national average. It's a sobering reminder that cultural recognition alone doesn't pay the bills or ensure a future free from discrimination. This brings us to a crucial point. Why do these ancient practices still matter in a world that's more interested in downloading the latest app than in listening to a songline? The answer is simple yet profound. These practices offer a blueprint for sustainable living, a lesson in resilience, adaptability, and respect for the natural world. In an era obsessed with climate change and environmental degradation, the wisdom of the Dreamtime offers insights that are not just relevant but essential. It's about understanding our place in the world, not as conquerors, but as custodians. As we wrap up this exploration, let's reflect on the legacy of Aboriginal spirituality in a modern context. It's a testament to the enduring power of stories that have weathered the storms of colonization, the trials of assimilation, and the challenges of contemporary life. It's a narrative of survival and revival, a reminder that the past is never truly past, but a constant companion guiding us toward a more inclusive future. In the end, these ancient practices matter, not just because they're culturally significant, but because they speak to the human condition, the need for connection, identity, and belonging. They remind us that history is not a static relic, but a living dialogue that continues to shape who we are and who we aspire to be. So, as you navigate your own path with that trusty GPS, remember that the real journey is understanding the stories beneath your feet, the narratives woven into the very fabric of the land. After all, even the most advanced technology can't replace the wisdom of those who walked before us. And that, dear listener, is a lesson worth remembering, long after the batteries run out. The sun's barely peeking over the horizon, and you're already up, rubbing the sleep from your eyes with the subtle grace of a lumbering ox. Welcome to another day in the life of a Neo-Assyrian soldier in 8th century BC Nimrud, where the glamour of military life is about as real as a unicorn galloping down the Tigris. You might think being part of the fiercest army known to the ancient world would come with some perks, but let's dive into the nitty-gritty to see how it really stacks up. First off, forget about a hearty breakfast. Instead, you're greeted by the earthy aroma of barley. That's right, your salary comes in the form of barley rations, no coins weighing down your pockets or jingling to announce your presence. It's all about practicality here. The barley you receive isn't just to fill your belly, it's currency, fuel, and, occasionally, a makeshift pillow if your day ends in the middle of nowhere on a hard, unforgiving ground. Each month, you're allotted a certain number of barley measures, and you'd better hope the scribe hasn't made a mistake, or that some sticky-fingered official didn't shortchange you. The exact amount depends on rank, and while the officers might get a bit more, you're still not exactly rolling in luxury. Now, let's talk gear. Forget the romanticized image of a shiny armor-clad warrior. Your standard issue is more functional than fashionable. You're suiting up with a tunic, some leather or bronze scale armor, a helmet, and a shield. The shield is your best friend, often larger than your cousin's ego, and it's what stands between you and the pointy end of an enemy's spear. Speaking of spears, yours is a solid 6 feet of wood with a nasty bronze tip, a versatile tool for both poking and prodding anything that threatens to end your barley-funded existence prematurely. With all your gear strapped on, it's time for the morning drill. The Assyrian army doesn't achieve its legendary status by letting you skip leg day. The training grounds are a dust-choked arena of sweat and curses, where your commanders bark orders like drill sergeants after having too much date wine. You spend hours practicing formations, honing your skills in the art of organized mayhem. Precision is key. A well-drilled unit can turn the tide of battle faster than a chariot on a downhill sprint. These drills aren't just about building muscles. They're about building trust. Trust that the guy next to you knows his left from his right and can keep his spear pointed at the enemy rather than your backside. And what about the living quarters? As a soldier, you're lodged in barracks that are as cozy as a clay pot in a kiln. Expect a communal living situation where privacy is a distant dream. It's all about camaraderie here, even if that means dealing with your fellow soldiers snoring that could wake the dead, or worse, make them wish they were. Personal space is a luxury, and if you're lucky, you might have a straw mat to call your own. At least the local fauna. A charming assortment of rats and insects keep things lively. Now, the Assyrian Empire is a beast, constantly hungry for more territory, and you are one of its teeth, sharpened and ready to bite into whatever lands the king's gaze falls upon. In this militaristic society, conquest isn't just encouraged, it's practically a civic duty. You're part of a machine that's been finely tuned over centuries to expand borders and bring new lands under the Assyrian yoke. This means long marches, often crossing hundreds of miles, where your feet are the only carriages and the blistering sun is your constant companion. Talking about sun, forget sunscreen. Your only protection is a helmet that's more adept at cooking your brain than shielding it from UV rays. The myth of soldierly honor and glory is a tempting one, but the reality is much grittier. Your life is a cycle of training, marching, and fighting, punctuated by brief moments of rest that often feel more like recovery from the brutality of existence. The spoils of war, often touted as motivation, are more likely to end up in the hands of your superiors than yours. Sure, there's a chance of snagging a fancy trinket or two, but the bulk of riches get funneled upwards to fill the coffers of the royal treasury or your commander's wine cellar. As the day wears on, you might find yourself pondering the politics behind all these campaigns. The king, Tiglath-Pileser III, is not just a ruler but a strategist, expanding the empire with a blend of diplomacy and brute force. His reign is a game of chess played on a board spanning from the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf, and you, dear soldier, are one of many pawns. But in this game, pawns are far from expendable. They're crucial, the backbone of every conquest and defense. All this talk of geopolitics might make your head spin faster than a Babylonian dancer, but understanding your place within this vast empire gives some meaning to the madness. You're not just fighting for survival, you're a part of something larger, a cog in the wheel of history that's rolling ever forward. It's a hard life, no doubt, but it carries a weight of significance, even if it's just to ensure that your barley rations keep coming. As evening draws near and the last of the sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows over the city of Nimrud, you find a moment to relax. Perhaps you share a crude joke with your fellow soldiers, or reminisce about home, wherever that might be. Tomorrow promises more of the same, more drills, more sweat, more barley. But for now, you take solace in the company of those who march beside you. In this world of uncertainty and hardship, that camaraderie is a rare and precious thing. As the last glow of the sun gives way to the cool embrace of night, the streets of Nimrud begin to stir with a different kind of energy. The city's heart doesn't rest just because the day is done. In fact, this is when the real action begins. With your duties wrapped up for the day, you join the throng heading toward the market, a vibrant hub that's more alive than a hive of bees at sunrise. Here, the pulse of the Neo-Assyrian Empire beats strongly, and you're about to see firsthand how the gears of commerce keep this mighty machine running. Marching through the streets of Nimrud, you're greeted by a cacophony of sights and sounds that would make even the most seasoned soldier pause. Merchants shout out prices and wares in a dozen different dialects, each stall a miniature universe of trade. There's a wild array of goods on display, from the humble barley, the cornerstone of your soldierly existence, to exotic spices that whisper tales of far-off lands. Smells of roasting meats mix with the sweet tang of ripe fruits, creating a sensory overload that makes you momentarily forget the smell of sweat and leather that has been your companion all day. Now, let's talk money, or rather, the lack of it. In this bustling market, cold, hard cash isn't the star of the show. Instead, it's a barter economy, a dance of negotiations where everything has a price, but few things have a fixed cost. You might trade a portion of your precious barley for a hunk of meat or a jug of beer. For a soldier, the market is both a lifeline and a battlefield of its own. You're not just trading goods, you're haggling, strategizing, making deals that could save you a few measures of barley for a rainy day, or a particularly dry one, as it were. Speaking of barley, let's put some numbers on the table. A soldier like you might receive anywhere from 30 to 60 litres of barley a month, depending on your rank and recent performance. This barley isn't just chow, it's currency, and making it stretch is a survival skill. A good chunk goes to essentials: bread, beer, maybe a bit of meat to keep those muscles from atrophying. A small jug of beer, your liquid bread, might set you back a few litres of barley. It's a steep price, but after a day of drills, it's a price you're willing to pay. It's the little luxuries that keep life tolerable when you're living on a knife's edge. Now, the market isn't just a place to fill your stomach. It's the beating heart of the city, a place where soldiers rub shoulders with artisans, farmers, and tradespeople. This isn't just an economic exchange, it's a social one, an opportunity to catch up on the latest gossip or hear news from distant corners of the empire. In a world where official news is slower than a three-legged mule, the market is your CNN, BBC, and Twitter feed all rolled into one. Don't be fooled by the romantic idea that these markets are peaceful havens of cultural exchange. They're as cutthroat as any battlefield. Competition is fierce, and everyone's looking for an edge. The bakers are in a constant arms race to produce the fluffiest loaf, while the cloth merchants peddle dyes as vibrant as a parrot's plumage. Everyone's hustling, and the stakes are high. After all, a successful merchant might earn enough to move into the social stratosphere, while a bad run could see them begging for scraps. The role of these markets in maintaining the empire's wealth can't be overstated. Every transaction, every traded measure of barley or bolt of cloth contributes to the flow of goods and wealth through the empire. This isn't just about making sure soldiers like you have a full belly. It's about keeping the entire system running smoothly. A well-fed army is an effective army, and an effective army is the backbone of the Assyrian expansion machine. The markets are the unsung heroes, the invisible hand ensuring that the empire doesn't grind to a halt. But let's not romanticize it too much. For every merchant who makes it big, there are countless others who barely scrape by. The market is a microcosm of the empire itself. Some climb the ladder, while others serve as its rungs. The disparity is as real as the sweat on your brow, and just as unavoidable. As the evening wears on, the market begins to wind down. The stalls are packed up, the merchants count their earnings or their losses, and the streets gradually empty. You head back to your barracks, clutching your purchases and maybe a bit of gossip or news to share with your comrades. The market has given you a taste of the city's lifeblood, a reminder that even in an empire driven by conquest, it's the everyday exchanges and interactions that keep the wheels turning. As you lie on your straw mat, the chatter of the market still ringing in your ears, you're struck by the sheer complexity of it all. The market is a small piece of a much larger puzzle, a reminder that while you might be just one soldier among many, you're part of a vast and intricate system. Each trade, each haggled deal, plays a part in sustaining the empire's sprawling ambitions. It's a humbling thought, one that lingers as you drift off to sleep, ready to face whatever tomorrow brings. And so, the cycle continues. You're a cog in a machine that never stops turning, a small but essential part of the great Assyrian engine. As you close your eyes, the city around you hums with activity, preparing for another day of trade, toil, and triumph. In this world of constant motion, you find a strange kind of peace, knowing that you're part of something far greater than yourself. But for now, it's time to rest, to recharge for another day in the life of a Neo-Assyrian soldier, where every moment is a chance to make history, or at least to ensure that your barley supply remains intact. Your eyes flutter open to the familiar sight of the barracks ceiling, a patchwork of mud bricks and straw that somehow manages to stay up there, defying gravity like an acrobat on a tightrope. The sun's rays have barely begun their daily assault, but the city of Nimrud is already stirring, and so must you. Today, though, your thoughts are less on the grind of soldierly life, and more on the invisible chessboard that dictates your every move, the political machinations of the Assyrian Empire. It's a world where kings like Tiglath-Pileser III, let's call him TP3 for brevity's sake, are the grand masters, orchestrating power plays with the deftness of a seasoned con artist. TP3 isn't just some figurehead plopped on a throne. He's the kind of ruler who reshapes the map with the stroke of a reed pen. His reign from 745-727 BC is a masterclass in imperial ambition, and you, dear soldier, are one of the many pieces moved across the board. But let's not sugarcoat it. While TP3's name might be etched into the annals of history, your own is more likely to end up scrawled on a forgotten clay tablet. You see, TP3 had a bit of a penchant for reorganizing things, like a middle manager with a zeal for efficiency. He wasn't just content with the old ways. He wanted to streamline the empire's military machine, turning it into a slick, well-oiled juggernaut. Before his reign, the army was a bit like a patchwork quilt, different regions contributing troops as they saw fit, like a potluck where everyone brings potato salad. TP3, however, centralized recruitment, establishing a standing army more unified than a hive of particularly motivated bees. This meant that instead of being a seasonal warrior, you were part of a permanent military force, ready to crush the empire's enemies at a moment's notice. This new military organization wasn't just about efficiency, it was about power specifically, keeping it firmly in TP3's hands. By creating a professional army loyal directly to him, TP3 ensured that regional governors, who might have had aspirations of grandeur themselves, couldn't just up and start a rebellion. It was a classic case of keep your friends close and your enemies closer. You, as a soldier, are both a defender of the realm and a tool to maintain the king's grip on his far-flung territories. Now, when it comes to the grand narrative spun by our dear rulers, they'd have you believe that every campaign is a noble quest, a righteous endeavour to spread civilization and enlightenment, or at least Assyrian-style civilization, which often involved a lot of pillaging and subjugation. But from where you stand, knee-deep in mud and sweat, the reality is a tad less glamorous. Conquests aren't about moral high ground, they're about resources, plain and simple. TP3's expansionist policies are driven by a need to secure vital trade routes, acquire fertile lands and, let's be honest, keep that royal treasury as full as a scribe's inkwell. Speaking of trade routes, let's talk numbers. The Assyrian Empire under TP3 stretched from the Zagros Mountains in the east to the Mediterranean Sea in the west, a swath of territory that would make any modern-day real estate mogul green with envy. The sprawling expanse wasn't just for show, it was a network of wealth, a lifeline of commerce that needed constant protection and expansion. Every mile of road, every conquered city, meant more trade flowing into the empire, and more barley for your hard-working self. It's no wonder that TP3's military campaigns often targeted key cities like Damascus and Samaria, vital nodes in the trade web that connected the ancient world. Yet, even as you march under the Assyrian banner, the disconnect between the grand dreams of the empire and your day-to-day existence couldn't be starker. The official records, those clay tablets chronicling the king's achievements, are often more fiction than fact, crafted to ensure TP3's legacy gleams brighter than a freshly polished bronze helm. Meanwhile, your letters home, if you're lucky enough to be literate, paint a different picture, one of long marches, brutal battles, and the constant grind of military life. Let's debunk a myth or two while we're at it. The annals record victories in the most glorious of terms, but they conveniently omit the less savoury details, like the times a campaign drags on because of pesky logistics or the morale-dampening effect of yet another rain-soaked encampment. Sure, there are trinkets of victory, but more often than not, what you get is a sore back and a closer relationship with your fellow soldiers than you ever wanted. The truth is, in the trenches of history, the lines between heroism and hardship blur faster than you can say Tiglath-Pileser. Despite the harsh realities, there's a certain romance about the whole enterprise. The idea that you're part of a grand narrative, that your struggles contribute to the glory of an empire that stretches beyond the horizon, it's a comforting lie, and one that keeps you putting one foot in front of the other, even when the road ahead looks more like an endless slog than a path to glory. So, as you lace up your sandals and prepare for another day under the Assyrian sun, take a moment to appreciate the absurdity of it all. You're part of a political game that spans continents, a foot soldier in the great drama of history, where every action, every decision ripples outward in ways you can't even begin to fathom. Yes, the barley may be thin and the battle's endless, but you're not just fighting for a king's ambition, you're part of a legacy that, for better or worse, will outlast you. And with that thought, you step out into the morning light, ready to face whatever challenges the day brings. In this vast empire where the weight of history presses down like the sun on your shoulders, you find a strange kind of solace, knowing that you're more than just a cog in the machine. You're a soldier of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, a living testament to the enduring power of ambition, politics, and the relentless march of history. So, you're suited up and ready to face the day, a soldier of the mighty Neo-Assyrian Empire. Today, however, is less about the grueling political backdrop and more about the nitty-gritty of what makes you and your comrades the most formidable military force of the ancient world. It's time for the afternoon training session, where the legends are forged, or at least, where you try not to trip over your own feet. Welcome to the training grounds, a dust-choked expanse that could double as a sauna if it weren't for the lack of luxury. It's here that the Assyrian army owns its edge, turning raw recruits into warriors with the precision of a master craftsman. Forget the romantic notion of a lone hero swinging a sword with dramatic flair. This is about formations, tactics, and teamwork. In an army where discipline is valued more than the fanciest chariot, the real hero is the unit, not the individual. Let's talk tactics. The Assyrians didn't become the ancient world's equivalent of a military juggernaut by accident. They were the first to implement a standing army, and with that came a level of organization that would make even the most meticulous event planner weep with envy. You're drilled in formations like the phalanx, a wall of shields and spears that's as intimidating as your mother-in-law's glare. This isn't just about looking good for the spectators. It's a deadly efficient way to move across the battlefield, turning your unit into a human tank. And while the phalanx might be the poster child of military formations, it's just the tip of the spear. You're also trained in the nuances of siege warfare, a specialty of the Assyrians. They didn't just knock on city gates and ask politely for entry. Oh no, they brought the whole party, battering rams, siege towers, and, for a bit of flair, the occasional psychological warfare. Imagine being on the receiving end of a siege, watching as the Assyrians methodically dismantle your defences like a child pulling apart a bug, except considerably less cute. The key to all this is communication, and that's where the Assyrian commanders come in, barking orders like auctioneers on a caffeine high. These aren't just any commanders. They're seasoned veterans who've seen more campaigns than you've had hot meals. They know their stuff, and they expect you to know yours. An army is only as strong as its weakest link, and you definitely don't want to be that link when the stakes are higher than the hanging gardens of Babylon. Now, let's debunk a myth, the invincibility of the Assyrian army. Sure, the records talk about victories with the kind of hyperbole usually reserved for fish stories, but the truth is more nuanced. Yes, the Assyrians were a force to be reckoned with, but they weren't without their challenges. Terrain, weather, and even the occasional bout of dysentery could throw a spanner in the works. The reality of warfare is messy and unpredictable, a chaotic dance where one misstep can lead to disaster. And then there's the human element. War isn't fought by automatons. It's waged by flesh-and-blood individuals who bleed, tire, and sometimes panic. Injury is a constant companion, lurking like an uninvited guest at a wedding. The Assyrian army had its share of medics, but ancient battlefield medicine was less Gray's Anatomy and more medieval torture. If you were lucky, you might get a poultice and a pat on the back. If not, well, you'd better hope you've been living right. Survival isn't just about dodging arrows, it's about enduring the grind of military life. The marches are long, the food is basic, and the accommodations make your barracks look like the Palace of Versailles. And yet, despite the hardships, there's a camaraderie that forms among soldiers that's hard to find elsewhere. It's the bond forged in the fires of adversity, a brotherhood that doesn't need words to express its depth. As you practice the maneuvers that have made the Assyrian army legendary, you're reminded of the bigger picture. You're not just a foot soldier, you're part of an empire's ambition, a living testament to its power and reach. The training isn't just about physical prowess, it's about instilling a sense of purpose, a belief that you're contributing to something greater than yourself. It's this belief that keeps you going, even when the going is tougher than a 2 dinar steak. So, as the sun begins its slow descent and the training session wraps up, take a moment to reflect. You're part of a legacy that's both romantic and brutal, a tale of conquest that's written in the blood and sweat of those who came before you. It's a story that's far from over, a narrative that continues to unfold with each battle, each victory, and each defeat. But for now, it's time to head back to the barracks, to share stories and laughter with your fellow soldiers. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove your mettle. And as you lie down on your straw mat, the weight of history pressing down like a lover's embrace, you find a strange comfort in knowing that you're not just a cog in the machine. You're a soldier of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, and your story is just beginning. As evening descends over the city of Nimrud, the barracks buzz with the kind of energy you'd expect from a roomful of soldiers who've just survived another day in the brutal yet oddly compelling machine that is the Neo-Assyrian Empire. It's time to reflect, to unwind, and maybe share a few laughs with your comrades, the unsung heroes who stand shoulder to shoulder with you through the chaos and carnage that's become your life. There's something about the camaraderie of a soldier's life that defies easy explanation. It's not just about shared hardship, though there's plenty of that to go around. It's about trust, a bond forged through the crucible of daily drills and the ever-present threat of battle. You've learned to rely on the guy next to you more than you ever relied on your own family back in the day. After all, it's his shield that's going to protect your flank when things get dicey, and it's his voice you'll hear above the din of combat urging you to hold your ground. But speaking of family, let's not forget the role they play in this whole saga. Many soldiers join the ranks because of family ties, sons following fathers into service, brothers enlisting side by side. The military is a family affair, even if it means spending much of your life far from home. Letters, if they can be sent at all, are treasured like gold. They're a lifeline to a world that seems to grow more distant with every passing campaign. You might say the army is your new family, but the truth is nothing can replace the warmth of a mother's hug or the reassuring grumble of a father's voice. And yet, as you gather around the communal fire, swapping stories and bartering for the last scrap of meat that hasn't been claimed by some ambitious rat, you realize that you've found something here that's unique. It's a brotherhood, bound not by blood, but by circumstance and choice. It's a family that understands the peculiarities of soldier life in a way outsiders never could. But let's pivot to a broader canvas. The legacy of the Neo-Assyrian military might. If you believe the propaganda, the empire is eternal, destined to reign forever. It's a comforting story, one that fits nicely on a clay tablet or two, but here's the catch. History is rarely that neat. The truth is, even the mightiest empires have their expiration dates, and the Assyrians are no exception. At its peak, the Assyrian Empire was a juggernaut, a sprawling behemoth stretching from the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf. Yet, like any good story, it had its beginning, middle, and inevitably its end. By the time the empire breathed its last in 609 BC, it was a shadow of its former self, picked apart by a coalition of former subjects who decided they'd rather not live under the Assyrian boot any longer. But why did it all come crashing down? The reasons are as complex as a Babylonian tax code, but here are a few highlights. First, there's the classic overextension problem. The empire was like a balloon blown to the point of bursting, stretched too thin to maintain control over its vast territories. Add to that a series of internal squabbles and power struggles that made Game of Thrones look like a family picnic, and you've got a recipe for disaster. And let's not forget the human element, those who bore the brunt of this imperial ambition. Soldiers like you faced the relentless grind of campaigns that seemed to drag on forever. The promise of glory and riches dulled over time, revealing the harsh reality of constant warfare. Morale is a fickle beast, and when it sours, even the mightiest army can falter. The Neo-Assyrian Empire's decline is a testament to a universal truth: nothing lasts forever. Even the most formidable forces are subject to the whims of history, and no amount of propaganda can change that. The empire's legacy, however, is indelible. It laid the groundwork for future civilizations, influencing everything from military strategies to administrative tactics. Like a giant footprint left in the sands of time, its presence is felt long after it's gone. As you sit around with your fellow soldiers, reflecting on the day and the empire you're part of, you can't help but wonder about your own place in the grand scheme of things. You're a cog in a massive machine, yet each cog plays its part in keeping the wheels turning. Your contributions, while seemingly small, are part of a much larger narrative. The lessons learned from a day in the life of a Neo-Assyrian soldier are both simple and profound. You've learned that strength lies not in the might of a single warrior, but in the unity of the whole. You've discovered that while propaganda paints a rosy picture, the reality is often grittier, filled with challenges and hardships that test your resolve. You've seen firsthand that empires rise and fall, but the bonds forged in the fires of adversity endure. As the fire crackles and the conversation ebbs and flows, you find a strange comfort in these reflections. You're part of a story that's been unfolding since time immemorial, a tale of ambition, conquest, and the human spirit's resilience. It's a story that you'll carry with you, no matter where you go or what the future holds. And so, as the stars twinkle above and you prepare to rest your weary head, you take solace in the knowledge that you're not just a soldier of the Neo-Assyrian Empire, you're a witness to history, a participant in its grand narrative. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, new trials, and new opportunities to make your mark. But for now, it's enough to know that you're part of something greater, a legacy that will echo through the ages, long after the last embers of the fire have died.